State for Trade Policy at the UK's Department for International Trade. I'm Alan Lai with the UK-ASEAN Business Council based in Brunei and have a couple of notes to highlight before we begin. Firstly, we would love to hear your thoughts and questions and invite you to post your comments in the question box, and our chair will pass them on to the panel. And secondly, do tag us in your social media posts at UK-ASEAN and at ASEAN_BAC. And now to deliver her welcome remarks and to chair the first session, I would like to hand over to the chair of the UK-ASEAN Business Council. Baroness Neverolf has had 3 careers in politics, in business, and in the civil service. A former UK business minister and board director for Tesco, Baroness Neverolf is now an active peer in the House of Lords and has tremendous experience in digital transformation and a passion for Fintech and Southeast Asia. Baroness Neverolf, over to you in London.
Alan, many thanks. I'm delighted to be with you all and linked to so many friends across ASEAN. I'm especially pleased that despite the challenges, Vietnam has shown true determination and chaired ASEAN in such an impressive manner through the COVID crisis, and actually giving a lead with your own good management of that crisis. A very great welcome to Vice Minister Khan, to Dr. Aladdin Rillo, to Minister of State Greg Hans, MP, and I think a special thanks to Yanti Rahman, who is co-chair of ASEAN Business Advisory Council, the ASEAN Business Advisory Council. This is our inaugural ASEAN-UK Business Forum, and we're so delighted to be co-hosting yet another meeting virtually with the ASEAN Business Advisory Council and the Department of International Trade. Now, the theme of this forum is Digital ASEAN, enabling a new normal. And this year, we have all had to adjust enormously, as have all businesses, to a new normal driven by the COVID pandemic. So whilst we've not met in person, this is our 5th event that we've co-hosted with the ASEAN BAC. And I'd like to say a particular big thank you to Dr. Kung, who has supported us and helped to lead. He can't be with us today because he's involved in the work on the ASEAN Summit, which is already underway. Now, today's forum will feature a session on how business can respond to the crisis, a session on fintech, a special presentation on global value chains, and then our session, our first session, which will look at how the UK and ASEAN can work closer together. And I'd like to start by asking the Honourable Yanti Rahman to give her welcome remarks. Yanti is a member, as I've said, of the ASEAN Business Advisory Council for Brunei. She is co-chair this year and chair next year. And she is also a Legislative Council member and a leading architect in the Sultanate of Brunei Darussalam. She has a stellar CV and has been a great champion of education and of equality. Yanti, over to you.
Thank you so much, Baroness Lucy. It's always a pleasure meeting you again virtually. Thank you so much for inviting me. We actually have Honorable Vice Minister from Ministry of Industry of Trade, Vietnam. Also, Dr. Rillo, nice meeting you as well, Deputy Secretary General of ASEAN. And we also have Honorable Greg, Minister of State of Trade Policy, Department of International Trade. Now, leaders of businesses in ASEAN and beyond, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, on behalf of the ASEAN Business Advisory Council, I would like to express our warmest welcome to all for joining us in this inaugural ASEAN-UK Business Forum. So it's such an honor for me to be with you today in this segment for the webinar series that ASEAN-UK Business Council has generously put together in partnership with ASEAN Business Advisory Council to tackle critical issues affecting ASEAN. most so at this time of the pandemic. At a time when lives and livelihoods are being lost, we opted to stay vigilant and relevant through this platform that enriches people, lives that provide knowledge and hope. ASEAN-BAC therefore congratulates Her Excellency and her team led by Alan Lai for such a commendable undertaking. Now, COVID-19 indeed has impacted the entire world, including ASEAN member countries. Our economies have witnessed a sharp decline, and while we recover, and we will recover, some sectors may be changed for good. Now, we cannot lose sight of the new opportunities created under these new circumstances. Now, we need to recognize that this situation will not end soon, so we have to find ways to adapt to this new normal. ASEAN is in need of digital solutions across all sectors. We are a young population eager to adopt new technology and innovation. This challenge is to ensure that growth that comes from a digital ASEAN is sustainable and inclusive. So in this most challenging time of COVID pandemic, during this time, the ASEAN Business Advisory Council are delighted to be co-hosting this forum with the UK-ASEAN Business Council theme, Digital ASEAN, Enabling a New Normal. It is my hope that together we can discuss the importance of digitalization to fight against the COVID, to save lives and livelihoods. So I do hope that this forum will continue to facilitate and strengthen trade, investment, and help enterprises to maintain business operation as well as enhance the business of networking. Now, to save lives and livelihoods has become the core message of ASEAN Business Advisory Council and our joint business councils, as well as sector champions. Now, this is why we have come out with our report entitled Pathway to Recovery and Hope for ASEAN, which we have presented in the ASEAN Economic Ministers and Leaders. It contains about 225 actionable measures that can be done now and in the next 6 months to build business confidence and trust as economies reopen and a vaccine is made available. Now, thereafter, we urge the fast tracking of economic reforms that have been stalled for many years to ensure the path towards a more sustainable and inclusive economic recovery for ASEAN's clear response. Now, in pursuit of more concrete and effective programs under the AEC, each chairmanship strives to launch a legacy project that it intends to champion beyond its chairmanship term. So these legacy projects are centered around long-term connectivity. We have Philippines that actually have AMEN. We have Singapore with the Smart Growth Connects. We have Thailand with AHEAD, and also this year with Vietnam on Digital Stars. For Brunei chairmanship next year, we'll greatly ride on digital transformation, on push, rethink, reshape, and strengthen TVET to be one of the pillars of economic development under this new normality. Now, as our legacy project, which Brunei will pursue beyond its chairmanship, we will launch the legacy project, which is called HIRED, H-I-R-E-D, Harnessing Impact and Relevant Employables Digitally. Now, this will be aligned with the recommendations on TVET, training and internships from the pathway of 225 report, where business internships will be introduced and training will assist MSMEs to improve the digital business capability and also their digital business plan. So we welcome partners to partner up with us and collaborate for ASEAN-BAC Brunei Legacy Project to make this. Lastly, I would like to take this opportunity to also introduce ASEAN Business Summit, which is going to be which is tomorrow, and it will be live streamed on our website as well, www.rbiz2020.bn. So I hope we can meet in person very soon, either in UK or in ASEAN. May I wish you all and families health and happiness. May I wish ASEAN-UK Business Forum 2020 Digital ASEAN, enabling a new normal, a great success. Thank you, Baroness.
Thank you, Yanti. I now move on to introduce Vice Minister Khan, who is with us today. The Vice Minister had a very distinguished career within the Ministry of Industry and Trade. And in addition to being Vice Minister, he's also, and this is very important, the Chief Trade Negotiator. He's even spent some time in the United Kingdom at the University of London at SOAS. Vice Minister Khan, thank you for being here. And perhaps I could ask you to deliver your keynote address on a great title, ASEAN and the United Kingdom, a partnership for the future. Over to you, Minister.
Thank you. Thank you. Good morning to you, Madam Chair Navy Oron and Minister Hans. And good afternoon, Deputy Secretary General Rillo. Ladies and gentlemen, it's my great honor to be here today in this webinar on behalf of the Ministry of Industry and Trade to discuss the future partnership between ASEAN and the United Kingdom. As we all know, ASEAN and the UK have a long history of close and deep economic relationship. Trade between the two sides has steadily grown in the past decade, both in terms of trade in goods and trade in services, and reached the remarkable figure of about £42 billion in 2019. So with the participation of ASEAN Deputy Secretary General Aladdin Rillo in this session, I am sure we will soon have a better insight on the cooperation and partnership between ASEAN and the UK. The numbers look fantastic, but I think you would agree with me that there is still a lot of potential waiting for ASEAN and the UK to explore. So beside trade, there are other very promising areas for cooperation: climate change, renewable energy, Fintech, as the Baroness already said, just to name a few. So it is high time for us to discuss and find ways to promote specific collaborative activities, enhance our partnership, and realize the opportunities. In this discussion, I am looking forward to the exchange of views between experts so that we can come out with concrete suggestions and recommendations about and enhance the mechanism to promote the stable and long-standing trade and investment relationship between the two sides. From the perspective of Vietnam, the UK has always been a key trading partner of Vietnam. We have just celebrated the 10th anniversary of the establishment of the strategic partnership between Vietnam and the UK. And we are discussing about ways to upgrade the relationship between the two countries. Vietnam, therefore, will support the efforts and initiative to foster trade and investment, strengthen the supply chains, and strengthen the economic cooperation between ASEAN in general and Vietnam in particular with the UK. So I look forward to discussing with you about all the opportunities that may be brought about by the partnership between the UK and ASEAN. Looking forward to hearing from you, and thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed, Vice Minister Khan, for a very persuasive and crisp speech, which gets us off in just the right spirit for our panel. We look forward to continued success, particularly obviously in the UK-Vietnam relationship. And I'd now like to move on, if I might, to introduce Dr. Aladdin Rillo. Thank you, Dr. Rillo, for joining us. It's been quite a year, I think we should say, since we spoke at our ASEAN-UK reception last year in Bangkok. And we've enjoyed very good relationships with you and your team and the Director General throughout the year. I'd be delighted if you would deliver your opening questions. And we're also looking forward to your participation in the Q&A. And I hope that friends across the world will start sending in questions. So Dr. Rillo, please, over to you. And yet, a thank you again to Minister Khan. Dr. Rillo, I think
okay,
you may
sorry.
not be
Let me say, sorry about that. Let me just say thank you, Baroness Neville Roll, for the kind introduction. And it's indeed my honor to be part of this inaugural ASEAN-UK Business Forum. And I would like to thank the organizers for having me in this particular session. Indeed, my pleasure. I would like to frame my remarks by discussing about the current efforts in ASEAN to overcome or to address this issue of the pandemic. I think like other regions in the world, ASEAN continues to face a lot of uncertainties during this COVID-19 pandemic. Despite all the efforts, all the measures that have been made so far, and considering the continued evolution of this pandemic, the outlook in the region, unfortunately, still remains uncertain. And I think this will also have implications on the region moving forward. And so far, we've seen how this pandemic has adversely affected the region, particularly our economic growth. For example, up to the second quarter this year, a number of major economies in ASEAN have suffered significant decline in their GDP growth. Our international tourism arrivals also are down by around 71% for the first half of the year. Similarly, a total trade in the region was also not so good. It declined by around 12% as of the first half this year. And when we look at total FDI inflows in the region, the situation was not also good. We noted a decline of around 33% in FDI inflows in the region. So indeed, these are the realities that are being encountered in the region right now. But I think despite all these uncertainties, it is unfortunate that ASEAN has been able to actually respond more decisively and timely, particularly to mitigate the socioeconomic impacts of this pandemic. I would say that the political commitment has been strong. We have now the COVID Response Fund that is already been operational to address the financing of this COVID-19. Also this morning, our leaders have watched the launch of the Regional Reserve for Medical Supplies. Efforts in the region are also underway to develop the standard operating procedures that would actually enable the region to be prepared in dealing with the future pandemics and emergencies in the region. But I think the most important response so far is on the economic front, and primarily the commitment in ASEAN to keep our markets open for trade and investment by strengthening supply chain connectivity in the region, and at the same time by facilitating the seamless flow of essential goods. And I think those efforts are indeed very, very timely given the current situation. We also have in the region right now a regional action plan on how to restore or strengthen resilience of the supply chains. And efforts in the region are also underway to implement the plan. For example, ASEAN has already agreed to exchange electronic documents, among members in the region as well as with our external partners in order to mitigate the adverse impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on trade. Also, last Tuesday, our economic ministers signed a memorandum of understanding on rollback on non-tariff measures on essential goods. Again, I think that is a very significant effort within the region to make sure that we are all together in addressing this pandemic. Similarly, the region is actually looking at how the existing FTAs in ASEAN can be further improved by, for example, incorporating specific provisions on how we can enhance resilience in the region. If you look at what's happening in the ASEAN right now, I think like other regions in the world, the immediate priority in ASEAN right now is obviously how to overcome this pandemic. The goal is not only to contain the virus, but also primarily to be able to move forward and to recover better. We have now a comprehensive recovery framework and its implementation plan being finalized. And again, this morning, this recovery framework was adopted by our leaders. The recovery framework basically serves as the exit strategy for ASEAN to be able to facilitate the recovery moving forward. It focuses on key broad strategies that are the most important in dealing with this pandemic and in trying to recover from this pandemic. And at the same time, trying to identify key priority areas and actions that are also critical to address the various impacts of this COVID-19 pandemic on the region. After this document has been adopted, we're hoping that this will be also made available to the public, because we recognize that we need also the buy-in of the different stakeholders in the region and even outside the region to be able to assist us in our recovery efforts. I think one important part or one integral aspect of our recovery efforts moving forward is the recognition that there is a need to focus on digital transformation in ASEAN. I'm sure, and I think everybody here recognizes that during this pandemic, the use of digital technologies has become very, very useful. Okay, and this is very much evident in the way we have the work from home arrangement and the remote working. And this actually, the use of digital technologies has been able or has enabled countries to reach other markets. And at the same time, in my view, it has unleashed a number of productivity improvements in the way people interact with each other, and at the same time, in the way businesses operate. I would say that this digital connectivity has become an important lifeline during this pandemic, particularly in terms of how we can further move forward in our recovery efforts. I have to recognize here that the digital integration or digital connectivity has been high on our agenda over the years. But I think right now, because of this COVID-19 pandemic, there is now an increasing recognition of higher or greater renewed interest on how we can accelerate digital integration or acceleration in the region and ensure that the use of different digital technologies would actually benefit the region even beyond this pandemic. That's why I'm very glad that our forum today is very specific on this issue on digital ASEAN, enabling a new normal, because this is actually one area that ASEAN would like to focus on as we try to achieve a resilient recovery moving forward. Obviously, there are different ways by which the different stakeholders can assist us in this digital transformation in terms, for example, of how we can further develop a regional framework that would support an active digital ecosystem in ASEAN. I think it's also very important that we need the support of different stakeholders in ensuring that e-commerce in the region, digital trade, will become an important aspect of our recovery efforts moving forward. In fact, even within the ASEAN Comprehensive Recovery Framework, there are actually a number of initiatives that we have indicated within the framework that are very much supportive of this digital transformation. So I think in closing, let me just emphasize again that if you look at ASEAN right now, I think there is a greater commitment in the region to emerge strong and resilient from this pandemic. But we also recognize that the path to the recovery is not just a responsibility of governments or the countries themselves. I don't think member countries in ASEAN will be able to facilitate the recovery by themselves alone. We need the support of the different stakeholders, including the business community. That is why I think today's forum is, for me, is very, very timely, because we want to make sure that in the way forward towards recovery from this pandemic, ASEAN is also working hand in hand with the different stakeholders, particularly the business community. I think I would like to stop here. I'll be happy to have more questions later on. Thank you.
Dr. Rillo, thank you so much, and congratulations on the framework, the recovery framework that's been adopted by ASEAN. And thank you for your comments on digital, which if we may, we'll come back to on the panel. Some very interesting comments there. If we might, perhaps I could now introduce Minister of State Greg Hands, MP, and thank him as Trade Policy Minister for joining us today. Greg's had a very distinguished parliamentary career, and of course, he sits for the constituency of Chelsea and Fulham. And I know how popular football is right across ASEAN. So we were discussing that earlier. I think today's discussion is a great example of public-private collaboration and collaboration across the world, which he's championed so much in his trade roles, which have achieved such a lot. Minister, over to you for your comments.
Well, good morning from London. Thank you, Lucy. Vice Minister Hang, Honourable Yanti Raman, Deputy Secretary General Rillo, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your excellent keynote addresses and opening remarks. It is a pleasure to join you in this panel discussion. And I'd like to thank the UK-ASEAN Business Council and the ASEAN Business Advisory Council for organising today's event, the first of its kind. I'm a great enthusiast for our relations with ASEAN. You rightly mentioned, Lucy, I'm the Member of Parliament for Chelsea and Fulham, one of the great centres of football, and I'm not going to digress too far into football, only to say that I could be thankful that Chelsea and Fulham doesn't change its MP as often as they change their football managers. But let me begin by expressing my condolences to the people of Southeast Asia, especially Vietnam and the Philippines, for the loss of life and destruction of property caused by the flooding and Typhoon Goni. I visited Vietnam right at the end of September with the Foreign Secretary, and it was with great sadness that we in the UK have witnessed the recent storms. We have announced £1 million towards the international response, helping those affected to receive food, clean water and shelter. Now, as we know, today's event coincides with the 37th ASEAN Summit, at which the ASEAN Comprehensive Recovery Framework, a roadmap for building back better, referred to by Dr. Rillo and others, was submitted. And it also precedes tomorrow's ASEAN Business and Investment Summit. I also should mention that I think we're joined on this call by our Prime Minister's Trade Envoy to the ASEAN region, Richard Graham, Member of Parliament, one of my close colleagues. So we have enjoyed working closely with the organisers, the Vietnam Chamber of Commerce and Industry, to support their ambitions. I would like to thank them for the opportunity for the UK to be active participants. The Secretary of State for International Trade, the Right Honourable Liz Truss, Baroness Neville Rolfe yourself, and representatives of Aberdeen Standard Investments and the BBC are all looking forward to participating. Secretary General Rillo and others have already mentioned the importance of digital in our recovery, and I'm looking forward to discussing that at the panel. But of course, the UK is one of the great leaders on digital transformation. We're reckoned to be the second most likely place to generate a tech unicorn anywhere in the world after Silicon Valley itself. And we're looking forward to working together with ASEAN on World Trade Organization initiatives in areas like e-commerce and digital trade. So I'm looking forward to discussing the future of our partnership. As Vice Minister Kang said, the potential of our partnership with ASEAN today and how we can work together to boost trade and economic cooperation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Minister. Thank you so much for all of that you said. And perhaps we could move on to the Q&A between yourself and Dr. Rillo. And actually, I thought we should probably start with the economic outlook, during COVID. So I don't know who'd like to go first, but perhaps Dr. Rillo, you could talk a little bit about the outlook for ASEAN and you know how ASEAN is responding to the COVID-19 crisis in that context, because obviously a lot of people who are watching us today are interested in the future, as well as obviously, you know, how well parts of ASEAN have done during COVID.
Thank you so much, Baroness. Again, as I mentioned earlier, the outlook for the region still remains uncertain, okay? Primarily because this pandemic is the first time that we have this kind of problem, of crisis in the region. We are in fact looking at a 3.8% contraction in our regional economy this year, and a recovery by next year. I think what's important to highlight here is that this pandemic is different from the future crisis in a sense that it has disrupted the productive capacity of the economy. Therefore, the responses will be very much different compared to the 1997 financial crisis and the 2008 global financial crisis. But I think what's important to highlight here is that everybody in the region is actually working together to make sure that we have this recovery that we're looking forward to. As I mentioned earlier, we have the Hanoi Plan of Action on strengthening supply chain connectivity, and that Hanoi Plan of Action is actually going to be implemented also, okay, by the region. We're also looking at the sectoral adjustment in the region is also being facilitated within the region, or since the outbreak of the pandemic. The different sectoral ministers have actually worked together towards ensuring that adjustment in the different sectors is being facilitated. So I'm talking here of, for example, our specific sectors on tourism, SMSE, energy, transport, and so forth. All of these are actually working together. All these people are working together to make sure that the recovery is there. I think one important point to highlight here, Baroness, is the fact that since the outbreak of the pandemic, ASEAN countries have been able to respond with targeted and decisive measures. In fact, at the very start of the pandemic, okay, I think monetary policy was immediately being resorted to in terms of ensuring that there is enough liquidity within the system that would help the sectors that were adversely affected by that pandemic. Then after that, when the situation actually became worse, I mean, massive fiscal policy measures were introduced. And I think we estimated that the total stimulus measures that were deployed in the region amounted to around $407 billion US, or amounting to around 12.9% of our GDP in 2019. So collectively, I think there is a greater resolve in the region to make sure that the recovery will be realized in the coming months. I think that's why we have the recovery framework that we have finalized recently. I think this framework provides not only the measures that we need to address at the moment to facilitate the recovery, but we're also looking at what are the different measures that would enhance a resilient and sustainable recovery moving forward. And I think that's where the issues on digitalization would come in, and also measures related to sustainable future, including, for example, how we can have in the region our ability to address sustainable investment, clean energy, and so forth. All of these actually come together within this recovery framework.
And I think there's a lot of support for how you've done in ASEAN and for those themes going forward. I suppose what investors are hoping is that there will be a bounce back to the sort of high levels of growth that we've seen in many parts of ASEAN, which have obviously been, you know, a major driver, I think, of the terrific trade and investment relationship there's been. I mean, could I bring in Minister Hans at this point and ask him what he thinks the ASEAN sort of UK economic relationship looks like? I mean, after obviously a very good 10-year run.
Well, thanks, Lucy. And the UK itself, of course, has been hit quite hard by the crisis. Our second quarter in particular, we just had today our third quarter growth figures, actually, and showed a really strong bounce back in the UK in the third quarter, although, you know, actually, although today our economy is still down overall this year, as you would expect. So the UK, I think, is, you it's still a long way to go, but I think we are bouncing back quite well from the crisis. I think in terms of the UK-ASEAN economic relationship, it's extremely strong. Trade was up 10% in 2019. Deputy Secretary General Rillo said earlier that the amount of trade that we're doing, around £42 billion sterling, is very good. We're also a big investment partner in ASEAN. We're one of the top 10 investors in the ASEAN region as well. So that is also a very strong sign of our relationship. I would say the architecture of our relationship is also in very good shape. The UK, as we all know, has applied to be a dialogue partner of ASEAN. In fact, that's continuing to be a dialogue partner because we are currently through our EU membership. I'd also say we've done an economic ministers forum dialogue between the UK and ASEAN that Liz Truss and I did in August. And I know Foreign Secretary Dominic Raab did a foreign ministers dialogue back just a few weeks ago in September as well. So I think kind of the intergovernmental and inter-UK government and ASEAN Secretariat relationship is in good place. I think looking broadly at trade, I think trade is absolutely the future for the UK's economic recovery and for the UK overall. We are, as you know, negotiating with a large number of trading partners around the world on both rolling over existing trade agreements like the ones with Vietnam and Singapore, as well as new trade agreements, and as well as joining the Comprehensive and Progressive Trans-Pacific Partnership, the TPP, also as we go forward, which also includes a number of ASEAN countries. So I think trade is going to be a massive part of that, building back better and greener. Dr. Rillo was talking about green growth, and I think the UK can do a huge amount in the ASEAN region on green growth. As you know, Lucy, the UK has got the world's largest offshore wind capacity. That is something that we are talking with other countries in the region to try and use UK expertise to assist in a green recovery for the whole of the region as well. And again, the UK stands ready to help and assist on that. So I think the UK-ASEAN economic relationship has got a very rosy future indeed. It is a lot of actual work and a lot of potential work, and the UK government is very, very keen to advance that further.
Thank you. I think we'll come back to trade policy in a minute. I might turn to Dr. Rillo, but I see that Vice Minister Kon is still with us. And I wondered if he would like to come in on this question of the economic outlook, from his position in Vietnam, which I always think of as sort of one of the Asian tigers. Minister. I think you're on mute.
Can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
Yes, we're not tiger yet. We are still a small economy. I listened very carefully to you, to Dr. Rillo and Minister Han, and I cannot agree more with them that before us lie the very big opportunity. COVID-19 is something ugly. We didn't want it, but it came causing us a lot of trouble. But Dr. Rillo is right that during that pandemic, we discovered the whole new opportunities for us to make the digital transformation. So it already opened up. We suddenly recognize that a very big potential lies before us. So I fully agree that we need to find the best way to utilize these opportunities. But in order to do so, I think that we together, the UK and ASEAN, together with the business community, we need to think about the two things. The first of all, the legal framework, because we see that we still lack the sound legal framework for the digital economy to develop. We mentioned about security, we mentioned about the privacy, Minister Hans mentioned about the taxation, And there are so many things concerning the legality, the legal framework. So we need together develop at first the legal framework for the digital economy to develop. And second, we need to address the digital divide among the ASEAN countries. In ASEAN, we've been talking a lot about this one, but unless you can bridge the gap between the countries over the digital divide, you just cannot go anywhere. You need to address that. About the economic outlook, Dr. Rillo is right. 2020 is not good, but we cannot do anything about it anymore. We already see the growth rate in many countries going into the negative area, but we do look forward to 2021. We do have the vaccine around the corner. The other day, we heard the good news coming out from Pfizer, and we will see the good news coming out from other companies as well, Moderna or AstraZeneca, other companies. So vaccine is around the corner, and I very much hope that whenever we have the vaccine, hopefully by the end of this year, the economy will have the confidence to bounce back. And I'm very glad to hear that the economies in the UK already bounced back in the third quarter. Of course, we're still facing a lot of difficulties with the winter coming near, but with the vaccine around the corner, we are more or less confident about 2021. And let me mention a bit about the opportunities of the UK companies and other companies in the region. ASEAN is the robust area. We can see that through numbers. And we have the 600 millions of consumers here in ASEAN. And we lack the infrastructure, we lack the energy, the renewable energy. And so Minister Hans already mentioned about the wind power turbines from the UK. This is only a small area that the UK can contribute to ASEAN development. I believe that there are still many other areas that UK and ASEAN can cooperate. And believe me, during this time, with all kind of fiscal stimulus like that, with the low interest rate like that, we have the very big opportunity in investment, especially the investment in infrastructure and energy. So Baroness, opportunities are abound and waiting for us beginning from 2021.
Like a man so full of opportunity and optimism. Thank you, Minister. And I think we can certainly do some more work. We have work planned on green growth between the UK and ASEAN. And I think the thing that you mentioned on the legal framework is also an area where there's quite a lot of opportunity, I think, for bilateral discussion. So we'd like that opportunity. I'd like, if I might, to move on to trade policy and bring in Deputy Secretary General Rillo again and ask him how ASEAN's economic integration is actually progressing in his view.
Thank you so much, Baroness. Given the current situation right now, I think, and despite the situation right now in the region, we're very proud we're still able to advance regional economic integration in ASEAN. And this is also despite the limitations of the virtual meetings and the adjustment in work processes. Under the ASEAN Economic Community, all the deliverables are on track as far as being achieved by the end of this year. At the same time, we are able to implement a number of initiatives that are very critical in advancing integration. Particularly, one important initiative here is the ASEAN Customs Transit System, okay, or ACTS. That is one way or one measure that we're trying to implement in the region to be able to address the issues of transaction costs and trade facilitation in ASEAN. Also, this year, we're able to implement or do the review of our ASEAN Economic Community Blueprint 2025. The midterm review of the blueprint for us is a very good opportunity to be able not only to establish what we have achieved so far in our market integration efforts, but it's a good opportunity for us to identify what are the critical bottlenecks that would help us address to make sure that integration is going to be achieved by 2025 and beyond. For us, one important issue here is the issue of implementation. And this has been an issue that we've been trying to proactively address for so many years. As we all know, within the ASEAN Economic Community, we have a number of initiatives, okay, that are being implemented in the region. But the issue of implementation is one area that we're trying to improve a lot. And the midterm review will provide that kind of opportunity. Similarly, we are currently in the region also trying to strengthen the monitoring of market integration. We realize that the impact of this market integration will become only meaningful if we're able to achieve results on the ground. That is why these two important areas or priorities in terms of implementation and monitoring, for me, are the way forward in terms of making sure that market integration in ASEAN is indeed progressing. But overall, again, despite the current limitations, we're able to advance our market integration. And definitely, it also provides us an opportunity to rethink, in my view, how we can make our integration better, given what's happening right now. And I think the discussion on digitalization and digital transformation is a good opportunity for us to rethink our integration strategies, particularly how we can better promote e-commerce and digital trade, and also how digital solutions can be further facilitated, not only within trade, but in other areas under the AEC. I think one very important area here is Fintech. For us, Fintech is the way forward in terms of ensuring that the developments within the trade sector are very much also supported by what's happening in the financial systems. And therefore, digital solutions in that area will be a very good way forward for us to make sure that the market integration in ASEAN is not only working, but it is also something that is relevant and also something that creates impact, okay, to the region. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. I've now got some questions from the floor. We won't be able to take them all, and they're not mainly on digital, but there are two I'd like to particularly ask, and then I'll come back to you, Dr. Rillo, and then I think perhaps I could ask the two ministers, you know, to give any final one thing that they want the audience to take away on digital for today before we close. So we've got these two questions. One's from Colin Jones. How has COVID-19 affected ports procedures and operations in the region? I assume it has speeded up digitalization, and will that be pushed further? So ports and digitalization. And the second is from Mark Beresford. Could anyone on the panel comment on the future legislative environment and the direction of travel on digital across ASEAN, so particularly around data? So a couple of questions on the direction on digital and data. Dr. Rillo, if there's anything you can say today, that would be helpful. But otherwise, any kind of final message on this theme of digital, the new normal, before we close. And then I will go to Minister Hans.
Okay, thank you, Baroness. I think, again, within the region, there is now a greater recognition of the importance of digitalization. And we recognize that the issue is not only about investing on digital infrastructure or innovation, but there is also a need to address a number of critical areas within the digital economy. And one of those, of course, is the need to strengthen data governance and cybersecurity. In fact, data governance is one of the priorities that is being undertaken by ICT officials. You know, there are now a number of initiatives within the region that try to address the ability of the region to further enhance or promote data governance in ASEAN. And also, this is also one area that we're trying to strengthen within the recovery framework. As I mentioned before, the digitalization will focus not only on data governance also, but other issues related, for example, how to leverage on technologies to strengthen supply chain connectivity, how we can further promote digital upskilling of the small businesses, even issues related to e-governance, as well as how to encourage innovative startups in the region. For us, when we look at digitalization, it is not only an issue of data governance, but of course it's an important area. But we're looking at different aspects of digital economy and how to make sure that these different aspects are really coming together to create an inclusive digital economy for the region. Thank you.
Thank you. And Minister Hans, I know you had some good stuff on digital in your Japanese UK trade agreement, and that this is an important area for the UK. But delighted in any comments and indeed any final points on digital that on trade that are important.
Yes, thanks, Lucy. And I would say a few things. First of all, the UK is looking to be very ambitious in trade agreements. You rightly point to the UK-Japan agreement we've just signed, which builds on the EU-Japan agreement, but goes further, particularly in areas data and digital. We remove unnecessary data localization requirements, which I think is fantastic news, particularly for Fintech, or anybody who's looking to do digitally enhanced exports or setting up new operations without having to set up a localized data set, I think is incredibly helpful. I think overall the UK is really well placed to be a really strong partner of ASEAN. Delighted, I think I'm just seeing in the corner of my screen, Gerard Grech joining us, who's our CEO of Tech Nation. The UK has got a huge amount to offer in terms of its tech talent. I think we are the #1 center in Europe for tech talent. I already mentioned the fact that on tech unicorns, we're #1 in Europe and second in the world in terms of generating technology unicorns. And also on investment. You know, the UK is, in my view, the most open-minded country in the world to foreign investment. We're a big investor in other people's economies and a big welcomer of inward investment coming into the UK as well. So I think for all of those reasons, the UK is a really excellent digital partner for the whole of the ASEAN region. And we're looking forward to developing that in our discussions during the course of the day.
Thank you so much. And Vice Minister Kon. I think you're on mute. Yeah. Unmute. Mute.
Okay. Thank you. Yes, I fully agree with Dr. Rillo and Minister Hans. Like I said, the opportunities are about for the UK and ASEAN to explore. On the thing that you said, I think that I already mentioned that we need to develop a very good legal framework for many things concerning the digitalization, and data governance is one among them. One among the things that we need to address whenever we develop the legal framework. So now there are a number of initiatives here in ASEAN, but I think that during that process, we need to have the very close cooperation with the UK and with other partners in order to develop a decent legal framework to warranty the cyber security, to warranty the good data governance, but at the same time to create the favorable conditions for our business community to develop. That is the utmost the important thing for us to think about. And let me brief you on the ASEP negotiation. We here in ASEAN, I bet you know about the ASEP, the ASEAN plus 5 partners, including China, Japan, Korea, Australia, and New Zealand. We are in the final stage of the negotiation. We can conclude the negotiation anytime soon. And if you can do so, we very much hope that we will have the signing ceremony of the ASEP agreement. The ASEP agreement is a very big FTA, the biggest FTA ever in terms of the population. And in ASEP, let me stress, we do have the very important e-commerce chapter. And in this e-commerce chapter, we already addressed a number of important issues like flow of data, the localization of equipment, and etc. We already developing some kind of disciplines. So I very much hope that with the ASEAN side and coming into force, there will be some starting point for all of us, the UK, ASEAN, and other countries in the region to develop a decent legal framework for digitalization to take place in this part of the world.
Minister, thank you. That's a very good note on which for me to start to close proceedings. I think there has been agreement that this work on legal frameworks that you mentioned, which obviously embraces data governance and cybersecurity, and is important in our relationship between the UK and ASEAN, and then right across the border region, should have more priority. And I hope that that will be carried forward. I think I have to thank Yanti, the chair next year of the ASEAN Business Council, our partners in crime, if you like. I very much welcome the direction of travel that she has described for Brunei, which will include digital and will include partnership and actionable measures. And we look forward to going forward on that. Minister, you very much explained to us the sheer scale of opportunity in ASEAN. And of course, you've done a fantastic job, as I said at the beginning, during the ASEAN presidency. And I think Dr. Rillo was very honest about the outlook, the uncertainties that there had been as a result of COVID, and that GDP has gone down. But he also, I thought, had an optimistic measure about how things have changed and how digital change had actually, he said, improved productivity, which I haven't often heard. And that was very heartwarming. It was obviously excellent to hear, for me, to hear from our own Minister for Trade Policy, and particularly his strong direction that there's great opportunity for trade with ASEAN. He mentioned the £1 million that had already been given to the Philippines for their disaster, which brought one back to tragedies that are not COVID linked. That was on the floods. And he highlighted a point that I'd like to emphasize, which is the place of the UK in digital, second place, if you like, to Silicon Valley, with unicorns, with a lot of tech talent and tech opportunities. And we mustn't lose this in our partnership. That is the purpose of this particular seminar today, which I will now draw to a close with a big thank you to all of the speakers, to the Honourable Yanti Rahman, to Vice Minister Khan, to Dr. Aladdin Rillo, and to Greg Hands, the Right Hon. Greg Hands, Minister of State for Trade Policy. And of course, a thank you to you all for joining us. Please stay on for the next seminar, but also thanks to my team at UK-ABC for making this possible. That ends this panel, ladies and gentlemen. Okay.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Baroness Neville-Rolfe, and to our distinguished speakers. We greatly appreciate all of your fantastic comments. We're now going to move swiftly into session 2 and have a fantastic discussion, a further discussion on digital ASEAN. We are delighted to have Natalie Black, Her Majesty's Trade Commissioner, Asia Pacific, who's based in Singapore, Dr. Michael Natuch, Global Head of Artificial Intelligence for Prudential, based in Bangkok, Cindy Rampasao, the Senior Vice President for Pearson and a UK-ABC Board Director in London, and Hasina Taib, the CEO of Dynamic Technologies and Brunei ASEAN Business Advisory Council member based here in Brunei. The session will be chaired by Gerard Gretsch, the CEO of TechNation. TechNation fuels the growth of game-changing founders, leaders, and companies so they can positively transform societies and economies. Their mission is to unlock the growth potential of 1,000 scaling tech leadership teams across the UK by 2022, contributing over $1 billion to the UK economy. Gerard's extensive international experience makes him perfect to lead this discussion. Gerard, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Alan, and thank you so much to Baroness Neville-Rolfe for a fantastic session just earlier on. So really good afternoon, good evening, and good morning, depending where you are. I hope all is well with you. As Alan said, my name is Gerard Grech. I'm the Chief Executive of TechNation. I'm speaking to you all from London, England. And a big thank you to you for joining us as our audience, and a big thank you to the ASEAN-UK Forum for putting this panel on. It's my absolute pleasure to be here and hosting it. So I'm really here, as Alan said, to moderate this next panel. This next panel really is about exploring how regions, countries, and economies are getting themselves back on track from COVID-19 using digital solutions and digital transformation infrastructure, and what challenges, but also opportunities that the pandemic has actually presented to businesses, work colleagues, and governments. But before I hand over to the panel, just sort of a few words to introduce the organization that I run here in the UK, as Greg Hens actually earlier mentioned. We're really about working with the fastest growing tech companies in the UK. We have worked with over 600 companies who have successfully graduated from our growth programs. And we have many alums who actually have operations in the ASEAN region, including Skyscanner, Darktrace, and TransferWise. Collectively, the companies we've worked with have actually raised over $20 billion in the last 6 years, and we've seen 9 IPOs and over 30 mergers and acquisitions. As the Right Honourable and Minister for International Trade Policy, Greg Hens, mentioned earlier, this is a very exciting time for the UK, and TechNation, as well as the UK, now accounting for 33% of all European investment in 2019, and 2020 looks set to be another record high. So we're continuing to evolve our journey, and we're continuing to evolve our perspective from becoming just truly a UK-wide organization to supporting scaling leadership teams and companies across international shores, starting with Southeast Asia. Indeed, since we're all about growth, thinking globally is really our natural next step as an organization. Indeed, recently, some 80% of the companies we support here in the UK cited international expansion as their #1 challenge. So we're really here to help them scale and succeed beyond our national borders into places like Southeast Asia. We will be working with the Department of International Trade and the Digital Trade Network to bridge the gap between the UK and these really fast scaling companies and the ASEAN region. As Alan said, our focus is to grow 1,000 companies in the next 3 years, and we have recently hired a head of international who will be developing new services for these companies, launching in early 2021. And for us, we're very excited about the fact that the next billion coming online will be coming from the ASEAN region, and so this is an important time for us. So I'd like to get to the panel now. I'm very excited to be joined by a very distinguished panel of true experts in their field. And I'd like to welcome the Trade Commissioner for Asia Pacific, Natalie Black, CBE. And Natalie, if I could just tell you to introduce yourself and also the current work that you're doing with the Digital Trade Network.
Hi, Gerard. It's so great to see you, and thank you so much for hosting this. I do worry that you never leave this study, because I've seen you in this particular position for quite a while. I know you've been working so hard to support, of course, all the tech companies you work back with in the UK, but we've also been doing some really exciting stuff out here in Southeast Asia. So thank you so much for bringing us together. And with Michael, Cindy, Haslina, we've got a phenomenal panel today. So I'm really looking forward to the discussion. And as ever, UK-ABC, you're doing such a phenomenal job. And I wish that we were all together in Hanoi for the ASEAN Summit, but this is definitely the next best thing. So thank you for all the work behind the scenes to make sure that this happened. I was going to say a little bit about what's going on in the tech sector out here at the moment and what that means for the UK-ASEAN tech relationship and some of the work that we're doing with Gerard at Tech Nation and more broadly. And you've got some great business representatives today who have some initiatives which I hope they were going to highlight, because it is quite an exciting time to be out here, even with everything else that's going on. I think it's important to echo what Minister Hans was saying in the last session, that really digital innovation can be a real catalyst for the economic recovery that we know is all desperately needed post-COVID-19. And Southeast Asia provides the opportunity for some really significant collaboration in the tech ecosystem. Now, of course, you could say that I'm biased given my role, but this is what the data is telling us. And if you haven't seen it already, there's a very good report out this week from Google, Temasek and Bain, which is the regular update to what they are analysing in the tech sector. So to give you a few headlines, digital payments in Southeast Asia hit $620 billion so far this year. The region registered 40 million first-time online users during the coronavirus pandemic. So that's taking the total up now to 400 million out of a population of about 650. And the region's burgeoning internet economy continues to grow at an unprecedented pace. So last year it surpassed the 100 billion mark, and it's still on track to hit 300 billion by 2025. So again, if you think of everything else that's going on, the fact that it's managed to stay on these projections is really rather impressive. Quite often I get asked, I'm sure it will come up in the panel, which countries in particular are interesting on the tech side, and I think it's always worth mentioning two. Vietnam has really led the bloc's expansion on the internet economy, and we've seen it go up 16%. From 12 billion to 12 billion to 14 billion this year. And Indonesia, again, with everything else going on, saw its internet economy grow by 11%, so from 40 billion to 44 billion this year. And at the peak of the pandemic, and let's hope we're all past the peak, we saw leading health apps were being used 4 times as much as they were before the pandemic. And education technology app installations have increased 3-fold. So I know Pearson and Prudential obviously have a vested interest in that, and we'll talk about it a bit more, but that rapid adoption is definitely coming through in the numbers. So what does that mean for the UK? And you've heard a little bit already in terms of the UK's journey through technology. We're now the 5th largest digital tech service exporter in the world at 23 billion, and we're projected to grow by 35% by 2025, according to a Tech Nation report. Better give them due credit with Gerard listening in. And of course, I think it's, we're always mindful about using the unicorns as the only measure of success, but it's always worth pointing out that the UK has developed 82 unicorns now. That's always quite surprising, I think, when you share that stat across Southeast Asia. So that's more than Germany, France and Israel combined, and probably not as many people know that as they should do. Tech Nation and Deal Room have also provided some really upbeat and useful information in terms of the extent to which the UK tech sector continues to attract investment. So we attracted 5.3 billion, more than the rest of Europe combined during this really difficult period of the first half of 2020. So it's no surprise that we are seeing more and more UK tech companies head out to this part of the world. We've got about 216 at the moment, and 6 of those are tech unicorns. But of course, our aim is to support even more heading to this direction. And in order to support that, we've developed the first ever digital trade network. So through my team at the Department for International Trade, with our colleagues back in the UK at DCMS, and with the fantastic team at Tech Nation. And through this 3-year pilot, we hope to develop more collaboration for the next generation of unicorns that we think can grow in this part of the world. We have also developed a new UK-ASEAN Digital Business Challenge to encourage collaboration with SMEs and corporates. And we are also working on a number of ways to make it easier to navigate the investment landscape in this part of the world, which is often one of the questions that we get from scaling companies from the UK who are heading out here. But of course, we will also need to be looking at that vice versa in terms of scale-ups in ASEAN who would look to expand into the UK. So there's a lot going on. And even in this very challenging time, the signs are all good in the tech sector, actually very optimistic. And so the question for all of us is how we take advantage of that. And going back to Minister Han's earlier point, how do we make the most of digital innovation to help drive the economic recovery? So I'm really looking forward to the panel today. Thanks again to UK-ABC, and thanks to you, Gerard, for bringing us all together.
Thank you so much. What a terrific opening. Thank you. Lots to think about there. If I could just ask the other panelists to introduce themselves, starting with Cindy, who is the Senior Vice President at Pearson. Cindy.
Thank you, Gerard. So I am Cindy Rampersad. I work at Pearson, where I lead the business unit that's responsible for technical and vocational education. So I think a sector of education that is really relevant as we all look at how we come out of COVID and really accelerate some of the trends, and I think leapfrog to a position of recovery. What I wanted to do very quickly was share some of what we're seeing and some considerations I think that we all need to be mindful of as we come out of COVID, and then share a little bit around what we have been doing at Pearson. So I think it's clear that what we've seen for sure is an acceleration of technology in education. What we've seen in the UK in schools and colleges is a very, very quick adoption of online and blended learning in the UK, but also internationally. And I should add that we have a real extensive number of partnerships of working in the ASEAN region with governments, with businesses, with education providers. And we're really looking forward to the opportunity to look at how we can learn from each other and continue to foster those relationships. So we've seen real acceleration of technology in education, which I don't think is going to disappear. I think with that comes a need to break down some of the barriers towards the fear, I guess, of technology in education, and particularly in early years, but also a need to think about how we upskill and enable the teaching community to be really comfortable with technology and education. We've also seen increasingly, and we heard this in the earlier discussion, and some of what you talked about, Natalie, as well, is that industries are transforming quicker, and we're seeing a real acceleration. I thought it was interesting that the previous discussion talked about green energy. So one of the things that we need to consider is, as we think about talent and as we think about skills and we think about future generations entering the workforce, the 350 million that are in the region that are predominantly young people, is how do we make sure that they're prepared for those younger industries and those newer industries? And for us at Pearson, that is very much about working in collaboration with governments, with employers, to make sure that curriculum around skills is relevant, it's accessible, it's affordable. I think the other big consideration is thinking about skills education full stop and the role of EdTech in that. A CBI and McKinsey survey that came out before COVID talked about 9 in 10 roles, any role that any of us are doing, will need to undertake some form of learning in the next year. Now, some of that learning might be really light touch. So for many of us, it might be how we operate on these Zoom calls, for example. Some might be more formal, some might be more technical. But if that rate of change is going to remain, and the acceleration of those industries in order to support growth in the economies is going to be crucial, then us thinking about vocational education and EdTech in particular as an enabler will be really important. And I think some of that will be about formal and informal learning and the responsibility around the individual, I think, as well, taking personal ownership, as well as government and employers being vested in that whole process. In terms of things to consider, I think there are some challenges, and I think one challenge in particular is around the digital divide and digital poverty. So one key area that we need to be working together on is that whole emphasis and need to really invest in the digital infrastructure. And that's particularly, that's going to be a key enabler to help accelerate some of these industries, but also accelerate access to skills and employability. And moving forward, thinking about what that means for people in the gig economy, what it means for women and their ability to access employment. But overall, I think EdTech is here to stay in schools and in lifelong learning, adult learning. And I think it's going to be crucial that we continue to work together to look at how we change the perception around it, but also make sure that it's set up for success in terms of the quality of it, but also the infrastructure. And I think, it's a key driver for supporting that recovery to growth and helping to accelerate some of these industries.
Thank you so much, Cindy. I couldn't agree more, especially on the fact that the rate of change we're seeing is just growing exponentially. So how we learn as humans to adapt to that will be critical. And I think there's a lot of reason for employers to really help work colleagues adapt to that change. We're seeing it every day here, especially as we will work from home, as you can see, as Natalie said, from my cubic office right here. And so that is obviously building new skills and how we adapt to such challenging situations. I'd like to turn, well, I think someone who really knows about the rate of change will be this person, Dr. Michael Natouche, who's the Global Head of Artificial Intelligence at Prudential. Please don't scare us too much, but I think there's lots of upsides to how AI can be used and deployed. Tell us more.
Thank you, Jared. And before I say anything else, I would like to say mainly upsides. But thanks for the opportunity to speak. Prudential is actually a sponsor of this event, and we're a very proud sponsor because this event really signifies what's important for us. It's the relationship between the UK and ASEAN, and that is a very important relationship for us. We're a UK-based company, and our main business is these days in Asia, and in particular in ASEAN. And also, it's the digital economy as a whole that is of great importance for us and for what we do in Asia and what all the developments that have happened to us and with us, and to a certain extent because of us in ASEAN. I'd also like to say that maybe as to balance the excitement about the unicorns, it's also a 172-year-old insurance company like Prudential that can bring innovation into Asia, and that is not just powered by ourselves, but that is once again powered by tech savviness and unicorns both in the UK. So we've taken innovation from, for instance, Babylon Health, a London-based health tech unicorn, into Asia. But we're also taking on innovation from high-tech startups across Asia and building them into our own health ecosystem that we're offering to our not just our customers, but users all across ASEAN. So that is really important for us because what we find is that we learn from three different strands of innovation. One is, as I just mentioned, technology innovation and unicorns. The second one that's for us equally important is the behavior of our regulators in the countries that we serve, and in particular in ASEAN. Our progress would not have been possible without innovative thinking and creativity and forward-looking regulators who control the markets that we serve and who've supported us every step along the way. And we're immensely grateful for the powerful collaboration that we've received. But really, we also stand on a third pillar, and that is the consumer across ASEAN. And it is the consumer who's almost teaching us the most, because it's consumer behaviors that are changing so fast. And it's the importance of these devices that we all have in our pockets and the way those change the expectations and on companies like us on how to interact with people and how to engage with people and how to bring products and propositions and also changes to behavior to their behavior to the people that we serve. So from our point of view, we really stand almost equally on these strong pillars. I would say in the way that we bring innovation from the UK to ASEAN, we also like to think we bring innovation from ASEAN into the UK based on technology startups, from regulators and from consumers. And those three are really very important to us. I can later on maybe give some examples of what that meant for us in practice for the new normal and for our health app called Pulse. But I leave that to later, Jared. Thank you.
No, thank you. And we'll look forward to more from you on that point. And finally, Heslina Talib, if I'd like to introduce yourself, please, who's the CEO of Dynamic Technologies and Brunei ASEAN back member. Heslina.
Hi. Sorry, I'm just sitting here in my... Yes, I'm the only one that is actually on PM, I think. I'm not sure whether Natalie is actually in the Far East, but so I head the largest technology company in terms of services, deploying the national initiatives for both the government as well as the major private sector. As you know, in Brunei, the major private sectors are actually government-led agencies. Majority of the private sectors are driven by oil and gas. But COVID-19 has actually accelerated our development of industries, particularly in terms of technologies. And mentioning about, I think AI came onshore because of contact tracing. And overnight, we have AI onshore in our little island, if you like. So, but I also represent the ASEAN Business Council, and as you know, we will be hosting ASEAN meeting next year. So a lot of the things that we discussed earlier and in this panel discussions will hopefully come into fruition in our hosting year. So what is an advantage in terms of a small economy like us is to be able to use the nation as a place where you can actually do prototype, where you could actually do pilot projects in terms of deploying it to the rest of ASEAN. But in terms of forum like this, we have had a few discussions with UK, ASEAN-UK panels under Alan, where we wanted to see what next year's discussion would be. As you know, this week, 13th of November, is the ABIS, ASEAN Business Investment Summit. We continue to do that virtually, and hopefully next year we will then learn from this year and how we can make it a little bit more interesting, a little bit more interactive. I think this kind of meeting will last a little bit longer, even though the vaccine is actually coming onto the horizon. I think there's only a limited amount of businesses would be able to join us next year. So a little bit of virtual meeting will still happen in ABIS as well as ABA and the rest of the ASEAN meeting. But this year, under the title, the pathway to post-COVID-19, we submitted a leaders report meeting, and in that report, the pathway towards recovery and hope for ASEAN, we outline the importance of embracing what I call the Industry 4.0, particularly as earlier mentioned, in bridging skill gap, particularly in ASEAN. This would be our main focus for next year during Brunei ASEAN meeting. I think earlier on, our Brunei ASEAN chair would be mention about Hired, a project called Hired, which is harnessing impact with relevant employables digitally. We think that it is about time for us to review the way we carry out our Tibet training and internship in today's digital world. And in collaboration of new businesses and services, particularly post-COVID, in terms of e-commerce and the digital economy, particularly in the digitization of health services and supplies, and data intelligence and data infrastructure. So in terms of contact tracing, for example, Brunei has advanced itself, although we actually close our borders, but we're one of the nation that are able to control and be able to trace within the hour, I think, in terms of any diseases spreading across the across onshore. But in terms of the technology behind it, we are preparing discussions on data privacy and ensuring that there are proper data infrastructure that can be enjoyed not just by one country, but across the region itself. And then the importance of financial supports for startups, financial supports for traditional companies to actually go on board and make themselves a little bit more digital friendly. And we hope that with the experiences and adoption rate of technologies, skills and knowledge, the UK, in the UK will surely be able to work with us in ASEAN to bridge the digital transform. You know, there's a mention about regulations and policy that needs to take place. At the same time, parallel to that, there are on the ground practical approach. Most of them are driven by the small business, new businesses, the youth, in trying to actually change the way we pay, the way we transact business online. Something that we need to learn quite quickly, and that again bring me back to the initiative that we wanted to bridge the difference between the traditional approach and the skills and the experience that one big company can actually include all the small and medium-sized companies to onboard them, to do a knowledge transfer. There's a lot of discussions on how we can manage the intellectual property in terms of collaboration of solutions. So a lot of these interesting things, I think it's actually quite important in our discussion on ASEAN level. So I think I will stop there because I have had experience in operating in the UK. But I think ASEAN is a little bit different in terms of growth and expansion. So I think the way to, I'm still finding a way to make it a little bit more conducive in terms of virtual meetings for both ABBA and ABIS. I'm hoping to chair ABIS next year. And try and come up with as many pilot projects, a pilot program as possible on top of our project called Hired, which is bridging the gaps between demands on the ground itself and how we can skill up or get experience as quickly as possible by collaborating virtually. So it's something that we have had discussion on with various people, particularly in the UK. We quickly need to narrow the discussion and make it into actionable item for next year, so that we can actually include a lot of the startups, the ABBA program that we see being developed virtually that we couldn't really embrace because of the virtualization. We didn't, I think, for ASEAN back perspective, it's really difficult for us to make the first virtual ABBA, if you like, startup program. So we hope to actually continue that, learn from this year and see how else we can actually make it happen in the new business environment. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Hastina. That was really good. And thank you to our audience who are actually already submitting questions. Thank you so much. It's very good to see that. And I believe we have another half an hour. So I've got a number of questions. I can't wait. We have put this panel together to really give you the best of the public and private sector's view on the current situation. So my first question is this, really. At the moment, it seems that over 125,000 people are coming online every day in the ASEAN region. And the digital economy there is projected to add another $1 trillion to regional GDP over the next 10 years. That is an enormous amount of growth, but what does it mean for governments in your respective jurisdictions and businesses that you're seeing? Can I start with Natalie, if that's okay?
Sure. Thank you very much, Gerard. And I know other panelists will have views on this question, because actually one of the big opportunities and challenges of all the trends that you've just set out there is to get that relationship between government and business right in this part of the world. Of course, that question actually doesn't apply just to Southeast Asia. It's actually one of the big global questions going forward. How do we take advantage of the opportunity that we know is there, but can be quite challenging for a variety of reasons? There's a couple of points I'd make. Firstly, I think the fact that we are all still living through a pandemic, and some of the resetting of expectations of the role of government, and particularly the role of government and technology in both addressing the immediate response to the pandemic, but also contributing to the economic recovery, some of the points I was making earlier. I think that's going to be absolutely crucial, and it's something that a lot of governments in this part of the world are getting their heads around at the moment. The second big question for governments is around regulation. So particularly on the digital side, it's relatively immature, as it is in lots of different parts of the world. And Cindy might like to say a little bit about that. So from an education point of view, there's lots of education companies I know that have had to roll out technology very, very quickly, but then there's been questions, for example, around how are you ensuring that quality question? How do you ensure recognition? And then from an AI point of view, that's perhaps some of the most challenging and difficult questions around regulation of AI, and the fact that geographically, ASEAN sits in one of the most interesting parts of the globe and will play an increasingly important role in setting precedents in terms of how AI will be used. So I think for me, the relationship between government and business in this space is going to be absolutely crucial. And then depending what sector you look at, the implications are going to be slightly different.
Terrific. Maybe, Michael, if you can talk a little bit about what Natalie just spoke to, that would be really helpful.
Sure. So to pick up on Natalie's point on the importance of AI, for us, that really is the key tool to enable us to drive financial inclusion across ASEAN. It's very difficult for us to scale in the traditional way, serving the people that we've served traditionally in the way that we have served them. AI will become an increasingly important part of how we interact with our customers, and it will change the quality of advice that we can give to them. And we think that we strongly believe that will make a big difference to people across ASEAN. And for us, what happened this year so far has, which I think is kind of, you alluded to, merely accelerated what we've already seen happening over the last few years. And some of the things that were previously thought to be impossible are now just commonplace. For instance, it would have been very difficult to convey to a regulator only about 12 or 18 months ago that it should be possible to sell a sizable life insurance policy just online. Isn't that a too difficult a decision, and shouldn't there be advice, a conversation over a cup of coffee or something like that with a financial advisor be taking place? And what we've seen this year in particular is the speed at which virtual communication, human to human, but also human to bot, or whatever you want to call it, has accelerated drastically.
What you're saying is that, what you're saying though, Michael, is that governments are actually responding very positively, including regulators, given the challenges. That's great. And maybe I could just put that question again to Cindy, possibly. Is that your view as well? Is that what you're observing, especially on the educational side that you were talking to?
Yeah, I mean, I think educators are responding positively and quickly, but I think businesses in particular are responding quickly, and actually, I would say businesses and employers understand the need to invest in order to make sure that they've got a pipeline of talent and that their businesses can be sustainable and continue to grow. So they really get that. I think what I would say with governments and with educators in at large is that in the same way as we've had some challenges around TVET being accepted and the kind of vocational education, I think that one of the kind of leaps that we need to make in this space is around the cultural acceptance of AI and digital in education. I think, Natalie, you talked about quality and recognition and how do we get comfortable with that. And I think some of that is partly cultural, but it is also, I think, about understanding what we need the learning for. And I think there's something about breaking down the application of technology in learning from schools, into tertiary education, into higher education, and then that broader lifelong learning skills piece, and really understanding the different components and the different design and the different access points. And for me, the recognition point is how you work with employers and sector bodies to make sure that what you've got is relevant for their markets. And also probably there is some work to be done to look at what the standards might be regionally in terms of acceptance. But I think certainly what I've seen and what we've experienced is that from employers and businesses, there's a real jump to this because this is where their businesses are moving. I think we need to work probably a bit harder to move the dial on it becoming more mainstream in education, and that's a cultural piece would be my interpretation.
I think what I'm hearing is that I think at this point, I mean, yes, it's unfortunate that we are living through a pandemic, but it sounds as though both the public sector and the private sector need each other more than ever before because of the situation we're in. Hestina, you run a very successful technology company. Are you working closely with government or are you working with other employers to really get through this and continue growing as you are? Oh, you're on mute.
Our major clients, actually the government. So I am the bridge between the government and the private sector, if you like. So I see a lot of, in the last 9 months, I see a lot of acceleration in terms of digitizing all the government services, particularly not just Brunei, but around the ASEAN region. I want to touch base very quickly in terms of our initiatives on the new program that we will be embarking in January, where we will be requesting a program with the university where we onboard 2 weeks part of their university program to qualify them for as quickly as possible programming languages, as well as project management and in terms of infrastructure building. So because what we find is by the time they graduate, they come in and we waste about 6 months at least. So we are actually getting in there and asking university, and we're actually successful in getting one university and hopefully the next one in Brunei, and hoping during the ASEAN year, we wanted the ASEAN country to adopt this across the region, where we can get qualification by getting at least 2 days out of the university program to work with a global company or SME. So that program means that we can bridge the gap between what is required on the ground as quickly as possible, because the technology that is being taught in university is actually completely outdated by the time we want them to deploy systems. So as a system integrator, though, one of the exciting things for us is actually looking very closely, and we're about to embark on blockchain technology because of the digital identity. So when we do cross-border, when we actually look at how financial transaction will take place, or even from health data perspective, we really need to digitize identity. And this bring about the next discussion which we should have on data privacy. So the implementation of digital identity using the blockchain is an interesting feature, and something that I think places like ASEAN is very quick at deploying. So we're very excited in pushing that technology, which I think if it wasn't for COVID, we will still be, thinking about it. But because of the transfer of data between health data, financial data, the eKYC, if you like, because of the trade, the new norm that we have to trade in terms of virtual trades, e-commerce, this accelerate a lot of the technology integration.
Thank you so much, and very, very fascinating and very, very useful to know. I'm just very conscious that the audience has been actually submitting a number of questions, which is terrific to see, and obviously these events would not be what they are without our audience. So I really want to give them as much preference as possible. And so let's go straight to some questions, and I'm going to direct them specifically to panelists. So this one is coming in from Mark, who says, in developing markets, what has to come first in EdTech? Acceptance by educators or infrastructure and equipment to enable delivery? Cindy, can I just pose that question to you, because I think it's fascinating.
So it is a fascinating question. I would say both, actually. If that's, I think you have to do both together. I don't think it's one or the other for it to be set up for success. I think we have seen a real move to educators accepting it, and I think it's about being able to demonstrate. There was another question about how do we make sure it's right at the basic level, and I think I think that point is about embedding digital skills and actually skills of the future in curriculum at primary. So it's not about waiting until it's about the world of work and lifelong learning. So so I think there's something there about digital skills and it being embedded much earlier. I think the cultural piece, I think I've seen a lot of investment in the UK, in the ASEAN region, in other markets where there is this real focus on vocational technical education, digital education. And I think the more we are supportive and we're enabling the teaching community to move to a new way of working and learning, which is probably about a mix of online and face-to-face, I think you get the acceptance. So I think it's the new. The infrastructure piece, I think, is interesting because I think there does need to be the investment, or the gap widens, and we know the kind of social gaps widen, and we're talking about that at the moment in the UK quite extensively. But I do think we also need to consider what the access points might be. So whilst there mightn't be Wi-Fi everywhere, we know that most people have a mobile phone, and so the ability to use a phone and use apps to support learning actually suggests that the infrastructure is there, but it's kind of how do we see that as acceptable infrastructure. So I think it's challenging ourselves around what infrastructure investment is needed, additional, what can we use? But then there's this big bit around the acceptance of digital supporting real learning. So AI and it being able to demonstrate that the learning is applied, it's kind of built upon, and it's creating a good foundation. So I think over time, some really good evidence that shows that, you know, digital and AI works, and it creates access and it creates progression will give the credibility, but both have to coexist or it won't succeed.
Thank you so much, Cindy. There's another really good question, which is you partly, I think, maybe answered, Cindy, yourself, but the question comes from Frank, who says, what would be the best digital enabler that government departments and businesses would like to see developed and personalized under this new norm way of operating? I think that's a good one. Michael, maybe you have a view on this one.
Yes, I do. I think there's in several countries that we operate, we found that regulatory sandboxes are tremendously useful because they enable us to bridge from the old world to the new in a safe way that is supported by the government and that is controlled. So that is definitely one tool that's very important for us. I think the other really important enabler, and sort of singing from Cindy's hymn sheet here, is education. You know, and I don't just mean education for the obvious demographic, for the young, but I think also education across the board. You know, we've seen, we've as a company, we've definitely experienced the importance of that, especially this year. We've seen two very different dynamics. So, for instance, very established tech-savvy environments, for instance, like the Philippines and Vietnam. We've just opened an AI center in Manila, and there's already an established pool of tech-enabled employees that we have there. And on the other hand, we have places like Myanmar, where we're really jumping ahead, and we actually. As a kind of mildly pointless anecdote on my side, our CEO in Myanmar actually learned to code and participated in a couple of our internal hackathons. So we're really jumping ahead there, and I think it's the importance of having education for all age groups, because we need to support the workforce and the change and requirements that will come towards them. So that those two things are really important for me.
Terrific. Michael, while I have you, there's another question directly for you, if you could be brief. How does Prudential work with scale-ups to bring in new technology to their organizations? I'm just very conscious that we have companies, you know, who are really scaling abroad and they want to work with companies like yourselves. What could you say and how you work with them?
That's a very good question, and one I'm very glad to answer. Really, we are very keen to bring the best of capabilities to the markets we serve, and there is not a day going by where I'm not talking to a startup or scale-up or whatever you want to call it in the UK to try and bring their capabilities to our consumer app. Which is at the moment very much focused on health, but and that's an important focus for us in Asia. So you know, anybody on the panel and in the audience, please do interact with Prudential through our app if you're in ASEAN, and come to me if you have a great idea. You know, never send a great idea into the desert willingly. You know, we're very, very keen to hear from you.
We'll make sure that doesn't happen. A good question has come in from Mark, which are, what are the top 3 considerations a UK tech scale-up company should take into account when building their go-to-market strategy for ASEAN markets to ensure long-term success? Is it about the right partner, appreciating the differences between the markets? I think this is a very, very good one for you, Hasina, as being CEO of a very successful tech company. A very good question too. You're on mute.
This is really interesting because in the development of technology, you'll have to bring those mature technologies from another region, another country, into the nation itself or the region itself. So it's interesting combination from my experience, and we used to be a joint venture with Accenture, to not over-engineer a solution. So it's important for a local participation in the partnership combination, because when you do a big concept such as AI, such as blockchain, you really need to ensure that it is practically applicable to the mass market. So when we deploy big projects, one of the biggest things that we find is trying to understand the business process itself through our change enablement program. This is as important as the technology itself. So mature technologies that is imported to the ASEAN region, I feel that needs to be, you need to work with, you have a barrier, a language barrier, you have a age barrier, you have a lot of barrier to actually cut across. And I think this is one of the biggest, if not the company, for me, from coming from the UK, Europe, and the US before, in implementing system and deploying system in this part of the region, because the behavior is slightly different. They're very quick at enabling. There's not much, you know, the infrastructure is really important. The infrastructure to collaborate with the people on the ground is really, really important. And the education needs to go in parallel to the deployment itself. It's interesting to see the best combination, the best formula for this is a changing formula. You cannot just plan and see the results. A more agile method in project implementation, for example, is really needed. You do a prototype, you test it on the market, you redo it. So a little bit more agile approach to digitization is really, really important. If you can get the right formula, and I see this in especially the last transformation in Brunei, as well as in the nation, in the region itself, it can be quite successful. This is really important. Whatever you do, this is really important. You know, no matter how big the whole concept of blockchain and AI is concerned, if you cannot do it, you cannot actually reflect it in here, you cannot build an application to run in this little thing here, it's not going to be usable. Nobody's going to use it. Nobody's going to pay for it.
Terrific, very wise words, and that's very, very helpful. Maybe, Natalie, you've got a lot of experience in dealing with companies, especially UK companies looking to enter the ASEAN market. Anything else to add to all the great stuff that Haslina just shared with us?
No, I mean, I think Haslina's given a really, really good overview, and of course, talks from deep experience of navigating all of this. I think the sort of common questions that I get asked is definitely the one that Michael and Haslina have already raised in terms of finding the right partner and navigating all of that. But I think probably an area that we probably don't spend enough time on is regulation, and really getting to grips with the regulatory landscape early on. It obviously affects all the decisions that you can make through your business development process. So that's very important. But of course, the complicating factor is that it's not unified across ASEAN or Southeast Asia. There's huge diversity across the region. And I think the ASEAN Business Council, and we're really excited about their work in Brunei next year, have got some good ideas and some good thinking around this. But it's probably an area that all of us needs to give greater attention to. And it's something I think that businesses are crying out for. Thank you so much.
I think we have time for one more question, which was really, it's a question of a very important topic. And it was actually touched on in the previous session when I joined this conference. And does the panel see privacy laws, data privacy laws arising globally? Obviously, we're talking about data governance, and data privacy is on the lips of many people here in the UK, as well as especially in the European Union, as potential blockers for businesses in the region, in the ASEAN region. So I'll repeat that back again. Does the panel see data privacy laws arising globally as blockers for businesses in the region? Who'd like to take that first? Michael, sure. Shoot away.
Let me start. No, not at all. We see it as an enabler. We truly do. It's always easy to say that we have, as we do, that we have the customer at the heart of everything we do. But and in 2020, that means safeguarding our customers' privacy. And that is a very, very important value for us. And we see the regulation that arises around privacy around the globe, and especially in ASEAN, as a great enabler of our business, because it enables trust in us. And that for us is very important. So we would really put this on, or like to put this on its head. It's a great enabler for us.
Terrific. Any other comments before I move to the last question? I'm going to try and sneak another question, possibly. Cindy?
Yeah,
I see that you've gone on mute.
Yeah, I was just going to say that I think it's important, especially in the context of EdTech and safeguarding, and actually just thinking about safeguarding and learning in a different way when we're using digital. So I think it's important to be talking about it now.
Excellent. So look, I have one question left for all of you, and that's the one thing you're really excited about the ASEAN region in the coming years when we look at digital transformation, digital growth, and the digital economy and the opportunities of digital technology. Maybe I could start with you, Hasina. Oh, you're on mute.
Sorry. Hi, sir. What was the question again? I was just thinking you were still in the last question.
No problem, no problem.
Yeah.
The one thing you're really excited about when you think about the ASEAN region and digital technology and digital transformation, digital growth.
I think it has to be the chance for everybody. You know, in the past, I see one solution being for a big pie of a disproportionate population, if you like. And now with COVID-19, what we hear, I mean, the solution that we need to come across, you know, whether it is actually a system for ensuring poverty line is being improved, the spread of dengue, for example, from COVID-19 studies that AI that we discovered. Collaboration for all levels should really be talked about, and especially in ASEAN region where SME and inclusivity is actually a lot more relevant. So for those, and this is exciting for me, coming from 30 years being in the UK, it's interesting to see how this can be translated. A lot of the things that is being done in the UK can be translated into this region. A lot of the things that, you know, policy direction, regulation needs to be standardized, but conducive to collaboration for all. And it's very fine line between a strong regulations versus practicality to deploy it to all. So exciting times to discuss this next year from education perspective, from infrastructure, whether it's data, whether it's actually solution architecture. This is an interesting portion in terms of licensing, in terms of data privacy. Very, very exciting time this year, well, the remainder of this year and next year.
Thank you so much. I think I'm going to be cheeky and keep going with the panelists, but if you could just keep it to 5 words, that'd be great. But I think leveling up is what you're saying, Hasina, which we all agree about. But Cindy.
So it's a region with a young demographic, and I think
yes,
EdTech offers a real opportunity to support the recovery and that bit around continual learning and really positioning the region well. To recover and leapfrog. Yeah.
Thank you. Michael.
Obviously, inclusion is for us the number one. And that's not just financial inclusion, but it is also, you know, being able to tap into the creativity of this incredible region. That is something that we are really very excited about.
Thank you. And Natalie.
Briefly, I absolutely agree the inclusion point. And for me, the most exciting thing is what we can learn from this part of the world over the coming weeks, months, years. The pace of change, the pace of adoption, the breadth of adoption that we're seeing as a result of COVID-19 means that quite often in the UK, we can maybe sit and look to Silicon Valley, look to Europe, but I hope more and more companies will look to Southeast Asia, look to ASEAN, because there is a huge amount to learn.
We certainly do. So we're already doing that, Natalie. So yes, very much so. So thank you so much. Look, I want to say thank you so much to every single one of you for sharing your wisdom with us today. Natalie, Cindy, Michael, Hastina, thank you so much for making the time, and thank you for answering the questions as well as you could. And it was really good to kind of get an insight into the world that you're living in and to share it with our audience. So with that, I'll just hand over back to Alan. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Shabad, and to our fantastic panel. That was a really fascinating discussion. Before we move on to our next panel on fintech, we will now have a very special presentation by John Lamb, the UK's ambassador to ASEAN, who will highlight a program that is supporting ASEAN's decision-making process on changes to critical global value chains in the region, the impact of which will help stimulate economic recovery from COVID-19 and support inclusive job creation, much of what has been discussed already. Ambassador John Lamb, over to you in Jakarta.
Many thanks, Alan, and huge thanks to UK-ASEAN Business Council and the ASEAN Business Advisory Council for the invitation today and for bringing everyone together. It's a real privilege to be here and to listen in on the conversation in this inaugural event. So as you said, Alan, I'm here to talk briefly about one of the things that the UK government is working on with ASEAN. It builds, I think, on a lot of the conversations we've had around the impact of the COVID pandemic, the economic recovery from that, and how we can look to the future engines of growth in this region. The program that I'm here to talk about is called the Accelerated COVID-19 Economic Support Program, the ACES program, and it's something that the UK government is delivering around the world with the Boston Consulting Group. It focuses on the areas where the UK can add real value and which I think are very relevant to today's event. Advanced analytics, data, scenario modeling of geopolitical and economic events and their impacts, and deep industry perspectives. So this study in ASEAN is one of 4 geographies that we're covering as part of our global effort. And we've chosen ASEAN partly because of our extremely strong economic links here and the fact that we're keen that those continue to grow and develop, but also because the drivers of growth in ASEAN have been heavily affected by COVID-19 as they have in other areas. The focus of the study here is on the resilience of supply chains and on how the future growth potential and value chains in the future will change and develop. And we're hoping that this work will help ASEAN policymakers and industry to kind of seize opportunities to recover from COVID and to put in place the planks of even more growth in the future. In a couple of minutes, I'll show a video which kind of sets out in a bit more detail how the study has worked and what the tool that we're developing to help those policymakers. But in brief, we cover 4 sectors: the automotive sector, consumer electronics, medical technology, and textiles and apparel. Before we start the video, I wanted to say a couple of things about the kind of broad lessons that we've already seen coming out of that study, which are a bit separate from the sector-specific ones. The first of these is that we can see really clearly that now is the time for ASEAN and the companies in ASEAN to collaborate. The modeling that this study has done has shown that the recovery will be stronger and future growth will be stronger if the countries and companies in ASEAN member states collaborate and work together. For example, in the automotive sector, we can see that the region will come out stronger by working together, and that will help this region capture shifts in global supply chains and the emerging electronic vehicle component market. The second big lesson is that public-private cooperation across these sectors will be really important. So governments can create the enabling policy and regulatory environments, but it requires business to take advantage of those. So for example, on medical technology, governments will lay down the regulations, but the private sector will need to upskill its workforce to really make the most of those opportunities. The third big lesson for us, and that comes through in the study, is that there are benchmarks of successes in other regions. So the recommendations that are coming forward are not just theoretical, they're grounded in real experiences in other parts of the world. And the final key lesson that we've seen, which again is extremely relevant for this panel, is that digital and technology will remain key enablers across all four of these sectors. Now that's true for all of them, but in a way it can be even more true for the more traditional sectors. So for example, in the textile and apparel sectors, it might be that companies who adopt new technology and digitally enabled ways of working actually are the ones that can survive and prosper in this environment. So that's just a quick introduction. I'll hand over now, I hope, to our tech gurus who can show the video. And then after the video, I'll say a few words about the next steps that we'll be taking.
Global value chain participation is a strong driver of socio-economic growth and increasing productivity in emerging regions, and has been an important focus for ASEAN member states. Since 2015, Southeast Asia's GVC participation has accelerated. However, the pandemic has disrupted this trajectory as it affects GVCs globally, making it critical that the region prepares for a post-COVID-19 world. This study focuses on 4 value chains in Southeast Asia, selected due to their potential to enable post-COVID-19 economic recovery and long-term development: automotive, consumer electronics, medical technology, and textiles and apparel. The selected sectors account for nearly 40% of total exports in the region, more than 16 million jobs, and a high number of MSMEs, businesses which are more vulnerable to disruptions. Automotive. The automotive industry is facing challenges to global demand on 2 fronts: maturing markets and shifts in mobility trends. COVID-19 has hit Southeast Asia especially hard, with regional demand declining over 10% more than the global average. Although suppliers are facing major cash flow issues, Southeast Asian players are well positioned to benefit from supply chain shifts and grow their share of auto through stronger regional cooperation. In addition, the region is in a prime position to become a global hub for electric vehicle componentry, due to its established supplier base, strong adjacency in electronics, and access to the critical resources for batteries. Consumer electronics. At 20% of regional exports, consumer electronics is one of the highest contributors to Southeast Asia's GVC participation. Post-COVID-19, the sector has remained resilient, positioning it well to support economic recovery in the region. While overall global demand has decreased, regional demand has increased due to changes in ways of work. Today, activity is concentrated in the lower value and highly labor-intensive steps of the value chain. However, supply chain shifts out of China and fast-growing local demand are increasing momentum in the region to expand along the value chain into higher margin activities. To capture this value, ASEAN member state cooperation is necessary to build out a regional ecosystem, optimizing strategic investments in key infrastructure, human capital, and 5G. Medical technology. MedTech volumes have seen strong growth during COVID-19, driven by a demand surge for essential medical consumables and equipment. As a large exporter of medical consumables, the region has benefited, with exports increasing up to 25% in Southeast Asia's top export markets. However, existing Southeast Asian players face capacity constraints, creating an opportunity for new entrants to capitalize on elevated demand, which is expected to persist post-vaccine. In addition, Southeast Asia's large and increasingly health-conscious population make it one of MedTech's fastest-growing markets. To serve this demand, Southeast Asia should invest now to grow the region's MedTech ecosystem. Making strategic investments in infrastructure, building capabilities, and establishing regulations are key to attracting global MedTech players to the region. Textiles and apparel. Southeast Asia's contribution to the global textile and apparel market has risen steadily over the past decade, positioning the region as a global contender. Post-COVID-19, global demand for non-essential items such as clothing is expected to decline, posing a high risk to jobs. As a sector with a large labour force, over 70% of which is female, the need to ensure resilience is even more critical. Today, the region's engagement is concentrated in labour-intensive apparel production, relying on imports for higher-value products such as textiles. Southeast Asia should continue to scale up its apparel manufacturing and capture greater value by expanding further into textile production. With increasing expectations from consumers on socially responsible business practices, the region can also differentiate itself as the go-to player for ethical and cost-competitive textile and apparel. As part of the study, the ASEAN GVC visualization tool is being developed. The tool illustrates scenarios across the sectors involving possible post-COVID-19 sector recovery and potential policies that the region can pursue. The tool includes two main parts: GVC sector dashboards and real-time recovery indicator dashboards. The GVC sector dashboard illustrates possible trajectories of the sectors under different COVID-19 recovery scenarios and future-proofing policies, and measures the impact on economic and social indicators, looking at metrics like number of jobs and female employment. The tool is interactive, and the user can evaluate the sector's impact across different scenario combinations. Each dashboard part, A, B, C, will have a deep dive view to elaborate further details. The real-time recovery indicator dashboard provides data across Southeast Asia and key markets, giving the user contextual information on the possible COVID-19 recovery trajectories across the markets and sectors. This dashboard includes high-frequency data sources such as online consumer sentiment and consumer activity index. For each data source, a more detailed view is available. We look forward to sharing the detailed findings of this study and the tool with the ASEAN community.
Thank you. So that, I think, is a quick illustration of the kind of work that that we're delivering through the UK mission to ASEAN and through kind of partnership between the UK government, the ASEAN Secretariat, and the members. So as the video explained, we're expecting this tool and this study to be finished in the next month or so, and we're working closely with ASEAN, as DSG Rillo was explaining earlier, to make sure that this supports the whole region's recovery work from COVID-19, as well as the kind of the midterm review that ASEAN is going through currently of its work in the economic community. As part of that, we're going to be continuing our outreach with industry players, with governments, particularly in those sectors, but really across the board. So we'd really welcome and encourage interested parties to get in touch. The goal in all of this work is to make a concrete difference to the economic recovery from COVID in this region, not to create a study that sits on the shelf. So thank you again for your time. Thank you again to Alan and the rest of the team for today. It's been a real pleasure to talk to you all.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Lam, and we look forward to the outcome of that research and to socializing it amongst our friends and partners in the region. Coming up next is our session on Digital ASEAN, Fintech's role in the recovery. And we're delighted to have the Right Honourable William Russell, the Lord Mayor of the City of London, deliver opening remarks, which will be presented by video, and a discussion with Sopnendu Mohanty, the Chief Fintech Officer at the Monetary Authority of Singapore, Nick Wild, Managing Director Asia Pac at Thought Machine, Tran Pong Chi, Director of Strategy for VNPay, Matt Mills, Chief Commercial Officer at Featurespace, and the session will be chaired by Dr. Matthew Kavanagh, Director, Group Government Relations at Prudential PLC and a UK ABC Board Director. This will be an excellent discussion, and our session chair has a wealth of experience in finance, regulatory affairs, and in fintech. Matt, over to you in London.
Thank you, Alan, and welcome everybody to session 3 of the ASEAN-UK Business Forum, and the subject of Fintech's role in the recovery, something which I know is a really hot topic now, and we've got a great panel, and so I'm looking forward to a good discussion on that. But as Alan says, first of all, we will go to the Lord Mayor, the Right Honourable William Russell, who I know, he's a very experienced figure in financial services, but I know that fintech in particular has been a priority of his during his tenure. So we will now go to the Lord Mayor of the City of London.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's a pleasure to join you today for the UK-ASEAN Business Forum. I am William Russell, the 692nd Lord Mayor of the City of London, and I'm delighted to be here to continue building the close relationship between the UK and the ASEAN community. For all of us around the globe, this year has been a challenging one. The ongoing COVID-19 pandemic has dramatically changed the working practices of thousands of institutions, and we are all continuing to adjust to what many call the new normal. Congratulations to all of you on your response to the crisis. As an international community, you have pulled together through this immensely difficult time to ensure health security across the ASEAN region. Your timely and efficient reactions to the pandemic have no doubt saved the lives of thousands of citizens, and for that, I cannot commend you highly enough. Through such international collaboration and resilience worldwide, I am certain that we will make it out of this difficult period stronger. As we begin to look to the future, we must ask ourselves what are the areas that we wish to focus on, so that we do not just build back the global economy, but build it back better. So far, COVID responses have focused on the issues of green and digitization, and in many ways, the pandemic has sped up work in these areas. With respect to digitization, it has been estimated that the speed of adoption has happened 18 months quicker due to the pandemic. For the financial sector, fintech innovation has been a lifeline for many during this crisis. From contactless cards to online and mobile payments, blockchain to open banking, all these developments have given people unprecedented power to manage their personal finances. This has allowed them to react quickly to the rapidly changing financial picture. In the UK, we are eager to work with the ASEAN community to build a bigger and better fintech ecosystem worldwide. The ASEAN community is well positioned to really lead growth in fintech, given your digitally skilled population, your young and well-educated demographic, and your growing pool of tech-savvy consumers. And by 2030, it is predicted that ASEAN's economy will be 4th largest in the world, indicative of your promising future. As a world leader in financial technology, with shared ambitions in innovation, the UK very much hopes to partner with the ASEAN nations on areas such as fintech and digitisation. In particular, we are keen to partner with you to enhance financial inclusion. Fintech has the ability to give more people access to financial services and digitise all aspects of the economy, creating a more robust financial system and ultimately enabling development across the region. This is an exciting opportunity and one which the UK hopes to collaborate with you on. Ladies and gentlemen, as we look beyond the COVID-19 pandemic, we must continue to invest in the sectors of the future, in sustainability and innovation, to build a financial system robust enough to withstand whatever difficulties the future may hold. The City of London is ready to work with the world, and especially the ASEAN community, to do this, driving the global economy and bringing prosperity for years to come. Thank you.
So we're thank you to the Lord Mayor for that. I think the people on this panel and in the audience don't need any reminding of the economic potential in ASEAN. But I thought some of the Lord Mayor's remarks there about the pace at which, the fact that the COVID pandemic, very challenging as it's been for everyone, has accelerated some of the exciting things that were going on in fintech anyway, accelerated them by around 18 months. I thought that was very interesting. And the particular advantages that ASEAN might have in terms of people and skills, and also the potential for fintech to really accelerate financial inclusion. So perhaps those were three interesting things I thought coming out of that perhaps some of our panelists and the audience might pick up on in what follows. So Alan gave a quick overview of our panel earlier. I'm gonna turn first to Sopnendu Mohanty. I'm going to ask all of our panelists to speak for about 3 or 4 minutes each, please, so that we've got plenty of time for the discussion afterwards. So turning to Sopnendu first. Sopnendu is the Chief Fintech Officer of the Monetary Authority of Singapore, who are clearly a standard setter and an innovator in this space. So it's great to have him with us. He spent over 20 years in leadership roles in finance, technology and innovation, and he's now responsible for fintech in the MAS. So it's great to have you, Sopnendu. Over to you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. And okay, look, I was hearing Lord Mayor's opening remark. Is actually he's laid out beautifully what is happening in UK is perhaps a mirror image is happening in Asia, in particular Singapore. And if I have to frame the state of fintech in Asia and using Singapore as a way to look at, we never had a better year than this year. It's an irony that COVID-19 has dramatically opened the growth of fintech, which we didn't expect before the crisis came in. And it's not a theory, it's not a speculation, it's actually a fact. If I look at the number, last year, the total fintech investment in Singapore alone was close to 1.2 billion Singapore dollars, a billion US. This year, year to date, we are close to $1.3 billion. It is more than last year. And if you take, I'm hoping by end of the year, it will be perhaps 20-30% above last year investment number. And you would never expect during a crisis of this sort, investors are putting money behind fintech. So the real answer lies when you look at where the money is going. And that's the good news if anybody wants to do business in this part of the world. Almost half of the money went to fintech companies who are helping two kind of segment of target audience. One, the fintechs are helping small businesses to digitize faster. Second, fintechs are helping banks to digitize. As you know, banks are historically not good in automation or using technology to the best possible way. These fintechs have created opportunity, have created set of solution which can any bank in ASEAN markets, small banks, mid-tier bank, or sometimes big bank can use their solution and quickly scale up their innovation capacity by working with the fintechs. So these are the two areas, and any fintech working in this space are attracting huge amount of money from investor. It also says us something else, that as we are coming out of the crisis, the people who are going to succeed are the people who are having a great access to tech tools, because the new construct will be low touch and high tech way of doing things. So which means once we come out of crisis, there'll be a bigger demand for such fintech to play in this market. So the COVID-19 to me is an interesting time which has come a decade back, because the history of fintech is actually in 2009 when the global financial crisis happened, and that led to the growth of the fintech what you see today. Pandemic after 10 years has created a new opportunity for fintech, because they're now growing beyond the ability to do or to offer financial services. They're now going into helping others to digitize faster. So that's a state of the play in ASEAN, which is a big discovery during the pandemic, and hopefully this trend keeps on. It will create a new set of opportunity for us to spread the spirit of innovation.
Great, Subnandi, thanks. That's a great overview. I know that you've got a lot of interesting perspective on the region as a whole, but you didn't have time to cover some of that in your. So we will come back to you on that later. But thanks a lot. It's a great kickoff. I'll turn next to Matt Mills, who's the Chief Commercial Officer at Featurespace, which has established itself as one of the UK's fastest growing fintech companies. So Matt, over to you.
Brilliant. Well, thank you so much, and an honour to be in such an incredible lineup as well. So just a brief introduction then. So we've basically made a name for ourselves in being able to help banks and FIs around the world protect themselves from the most sophisticated types of fraud and money laundering attacks. So in general, we're able to reduce those sorts of fraud losses by 50, 60, 70%, sometimes even more against the current best-in-class tools, and reduce the false positives at the same time. But also in things like AML, actually provide you detection against things that you weren't even looking for. So it's a truly innovative approach based on the most advanced machine learning techniques in the world right now, based out of what was developed at Cambridge University. And then over the last couple of years, we've been expanding more into Asia. So we've actually working with one of the biggest banks in Asia. So HSBC is publicly stated as one of our customers, and we do a variety of different things for them. And then also we work with a couple of other bigger organizations in the region doing specific things around payments fraud and credit card fraud. And I think for us, the lockdown in the UK, and then also the sort of general COVID impact has been quite interesting, because fraud has generally speaking shifted towards card not present e-commerce fraud, which is actually where traditional fraud controls are really bad. So traditional fraud controls are relatively good when it comes to counterfeit cards or stolen cards, but they really struggle with e-commerce. And actually, that's always where we built a good name for ourselves. So for us, this period's been quite interesting, because it's really sped up a lot of people coming to us going, well, we really need to sort this e-commerce problem out now. So we've been able to work with some relatively large institutions. Getting them ready for what fraud will look like from now kind of going forward.
Great, thank you, Matt. It's a good reminder that although fintech is a massive boost for the economy, it brings risks, of course. but those risks, managing those risks, helping companies manage those risks is an opportunity itself for companies like yourself. So great to have that. I'll turn now to Tran Fong Chi, the Director of Strategy at VNPay. He's also got many years of experience in the financial industry and previously a partner in a fund manager, DGC Capital. So over to you to tell us a bit about what VNPay is doing in this space. I think you need to unmute.
Right. Hi. Yeah.
Right. We're now hearing you.
Sorry. Thank you for having me today. I'm very honored to be here to discuss and exchange our views with international partners about VNPay and what we've done in Vietnam. It's great to hear from Mohanty that a lot has gone to fintech that helps to enables and digitalize banks and merchants and small SMEs. That's what exactly we've been doing in Vietnam. So VNPay was founded in 2007 with a very simple idea. We simplifying Vietnamese lives through technologies and starting with payment. The first thing we did was to do SMS banking. And by 2013, we've done through all the cycles of fintech, SMS banking, selling top-up via SMS, and then payment gateway in 2011. 2013, we have the first launch for mobile banking app for a major bank in Vietnam. Over the past 7 years, we have grown the portfolio of customers from one single bank in 2013 to 20 banks in Vietnam. We have 80% market shares in mobile banking applications, providing a SaaS service for these banks, build application for them, and what we did, we helped them to build each bank's mobile banking app as a super app. That's what we've done, and we kind of align with our bank partners and the governments to push. Our aspiration is to have like cashless payment in Vietnam up to 60% or more by 2025. And we've done step by step building mobile banking apps, enable people to pay for QR code. We create national QR code standard for Vietnam. We have gone to the side of merchant acquisition. We have crossed 100,000 merchants earlier this year. And with the COVID-19, in fact, we have seen acceleration in terms of banking digitalizations and adoption in merchants for using online payments, QR payments, and systems, right? So that's exactly what we've done. Now we are one of the largest fintech company in Vietnam, privately owned, and we run digital banking, digital payment, travel, and e-commerce across the platform. Yeah, so that's what VNPay has been doing and building for the past 13 years. Yeah. So as I said, COVID-19 has provided us a wonderful opportunity to accelerate the fintech industry in Vietnam. We are building and keen on these opportunities, and I think next year I think we have a leap forward in terms of across all the sector in terms of payment, either payment, insurance, and lending, peer-to-peer lending platform. We see a lot of them coming up, yeah, I see great opportunities in Vietnam here. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much, Chi. So for our final panelist, we go to Nick Wild in Singapore, I think. He's the Managing Director for Asia Pacific of Thought Machine, and has been responsible for building Thought Machine's businesses across Asia Pacific. So Nick, over to you.
Thanks, Matt. Yes, I am in Singapore. I'm lucky enough to live here. We're a UK fintech. We've been in, well, personally, I've been in Singapore for 12, 13 years now. Thought Machine opened at the beginning of this year. and already getting extremely good traction across the region. We basically are core banking in the cloud, and most people who wander the street and have a bank account probably don't even think about core banking. It's it's been the plumbing. It's a very unsexy piece of software. But whilst over the last 10, 15 years we've seen radical changes in the move to digital, and COVID has certainly been an accelerator for that. A lot of that change has been in the front end, in the channels, the app, the web, those kind of things. The back end, the plumbing, has been sort of stuck in the 1970s, 1980s. The reason that is now important, and why what we do can bring to the market will help drive forward, is in a couple of areas. One is banking is becoming more and more embedded. We're seeing organisations like Grab and e-commerce platforms and taxi, transportation companies and all that sort of thing, embedding payments and everything into their, into the jobs to be done for the average consumer. The plumbing has made that particularly difficult, and what we're about is trying to make that easier and helping banks and fintechs move forward and be able to provide sort of more of that and accelerate more of that by going up into the cloud, API enabled, a whole bunch of other things. But one of the other things is to define financial products as software code. So rather than them being locked away in a black box and defined by by the vendor, it can be defined by the bank or by the fintech. So you can start to conceive of products that are hyper personalized for various different segments. And I think it's especially important in Asia Pacific, because banking clearly doesn't work for the unbanked. And a lot of that has been because banks cannot afford to serve the unbanked, because the infrastructure and the technology has made it too difficult, and the products that came pre-packaged didn't suit the underbanked and the unbanked. What we're now about is helping banks, be able to integrate into various ecosystems where people need it, and serve serve people at all levels of the pyramid. And I think fintech in general, we are one, but there are plenty of others around us. Have already got some great stories to tell about how we can support development in the region. It's not just about making money from selling software. It's doing well by doing good.
Great, thanks, Nick. And can I say thank you to all the panelists for being so disciplined in your opening remarks, which leaves us a good chunk of time now for Q&A. I wanted to, please, to everyone watching and listening in, please send in your questions, and I will do my best to point those to the right direction to our panelists. But I'll kick off, I think, by picking up something that Nick, you were just talking about, which is the real opportunity that fintech has to help with financial inclusion, which a lot of governments and a lot of businesses in ASEAN have been really focused on, governments and regulators and businesses over the last few years. But fintech, using new technology really is an opportunity to do that. I might come back to you, Nick, see if there's anything more you want to say, but I wanted to turn first to Mohanty to give us the regulatory perspective on that. What can, how do regulators see that, and what can they do to help? And then also, Chi, maybe if you could say something about how you see fintech giving more people access to financial services in Vietnam. So Mohanty, over to you first.
So let me give you a sense of how there's a clear shift on the regulatory framework when it comes to fintech, and this has happened over the last 5 years. I'll take a very recent example: the payment regulation which Singapore released early this year, and what exactly we did there. 5 years back, when we started thinking about fintech, we could have very well put together or use the existing payment regulation to regulate the fintechs who are in the space of payment. As an example, but the unintended or the bad consequence of that action would have a small fintech trying to solve a small problem is regulated by a huge regulation. You end up putting the full burden of regulation for an activity where the likely risk is very smaller because the activity is small. So there is a shift from an entity regulation to an activity based regulation, and that shift is happening as we speak in ASEAN market. An example for that is the payment regulation. We used to have one big regulation on payment. We didn't go and told all the fintech, to run a payment service in Singapore, you got to comply to this regulation. We took time. We actually followed the principle of fintech to build a new regulation. What do fintech do very well? They unbundle a complex problem to small problem, and they try to solve it beautifully. We also did exactly the same. We unbundled the big payment regulation and broke into 7 different parts. And for each of the regulation, we created a set of rules. If you are doing that particular activity, you will only be regulated for that activity, which is proportionate to the risk it likely to bring in. So an example would be, we have a regulation which only applied to a wallet operator. So they don't have to do the whole big regulation, comply to whole big regulation and try to burden themselves. So this is a way where the shift has happened in Asia. So that's one example. There are also regulatory updates coming in space of insurance. Asia didn't had a regulatory stance on online distribution of insurance products. So it's also getting refined in many markets. We didn't have a specific regulation upgrade on platform lending. Many regulators in Asia, in ASEAN particularly, they've started putting specific regulation for if you're running a platform lending service. So what you were saying, Matt, is the regulatory view, broadly regulatory view in Asia has been trying to follow the fintech way, which is unbundle complex regulation, build small modular activity-based regulation, and that allows a better framework for the innovation to succeed. And if they go bigger, the regulatory obligation also get bigger because they're doing more things. So more regulation they have to comply to. That is one piece. The second big, I think, which is not happening in other market, is the rise of issuing digital licenses, digital banking license. Of the 10 countries in ASEAN, they're now close to in process or going to grant more than 20 plus new digital bank license, unprecedented. Because we have existing, so many banks are there, still the regulators went ahead and in process of granting 20 plus new digital bank license in this growing market. What does it signify? Regulators are actually telling the banks, I'm going to give license to a new kind of bank who is going to use technology as a way to deliver service. They may not be putting a lot of physical active services. They're purely digital. And I'm willing to support this kind of new licenses. Of course, they have to have comply to the whole, as a deposit taking institution, there's a certain regulatory expectation. But this is a great signaling from regulators in this market, their willingness to issue a new kind of digital bank license. So there's a new kind of bank come to play in this market. There's a second piece. The third regulatory support this market is getting is the rise of building digital public rails. Let me explain that a little more clearly. I think the progressive policymaker in this part of the world have realized that to play in a digital economy, you've got to put certain public rail or public good in practice. Things like a national digital identity infrastructure, because we are going to transact in a world where I'm not going to see you. My identity becomes the most important factor. So the rise of digital identity becomes a key enabler for building new kind of banking services. Examples in Singapore, your Sing Pass can be used to receive money, your Sing Pass can be used to open a bank account. There's a whole set of advantages comes with the digital identity. Same as India, the Aadhaar, the great Aadhaar program. The second piece of public good is there's a clear understanding that regulators will start thinking of putting together a public good called data system or data exchange. These are the set of infrastructure where a certain data about you is trusted, is a golden source, and this can be shared by the consumer to get into digital services. The third piece of public good is putting highly efficient payment systems. An example out of Singapore today, I can move money. I can pay somebody in Singapore in 3 clicks, 0 cost, without knowing your bank details. Just I need to know your mobile phone number or your national ID. Same is true for Thailand. They have a prompt pay where they just need to know their mobile phone number to send money. By first quarter next year, Singapore is Pay Now is going to connect to Thailand prompt pay, which means if I have to pay somebody in Thailand, all I have to do is get the mobile phone number of the person in Thailand, and I can send money exactly 3 clicks in a safe and secure way with full compliance to AML CFT standards. And the fourth piece is a desire to build a consent system which allows people, all of us, to be able to consent our data being used by third party electronically. So there's a rise of many public goods which will be part of the new digital architecture, and that becomes the core driver for a new digital economy. So these are the 3 big areas where regulators are putting a lot of effort to get it right.
Thank you, Mohanty. Gee, I don't know, do you want to either pick up on anything that Mohanty just said, but also talk about your experience and plans for using new technology to reach new kinds of customers?
Yeah, so I think for us, it's lucky that the bank sector in Vietnam has been very open to the idea of having a private company like ourselves, helping them to develop the mobile banking system, right? So if you talk about in 2013, mobile banking is just like a lipstick, the cosmetic for digital bank system, right? And nobody think about mobile banking will be a significant transaction channel. But by 2017, that is the inevitable trend. Everyone has mobile banking apps because of the mobile rate in Vietnam, thanks to the largest telcos, right? The ARPU is so cheap, and they have, I think the number of subscribers is 1.5 times the population. So a number of numbers. So this is an interesting opportunities for us, and with the openness of the banking system, the banks in Vietnam, we have a chance to help them to develop the mobile banking app from H Bank become a super app. That's what we have done. We build for them the service business behind, meaning that we help them to sell top up, sell air tickets, travels, products, travel insurance, and now I think upcoming we're helping them to sell some micro insurance product on that. Right? That is one part of helping bank users to engage more with the mobile banking app and transact more often, right? Have more chance to open the app itself. So that's what we've done in the past 5 years. In this year, it's interesting situation, as I say, we have a chance to help a few banks to engage both digital banking on the web and the mobile, and increase the number of the level of engagement to another level. Right? We were able to help the banks to implement key functionalities like eKYC on the banking app. As COVID-19 happened, accelerated, we've seen, as Mohanty has said, right? In Vietnam, we start to see fully digital banks, and eKYC become a basic function, a standard in any mobile banking app. It will help accelerate to for the banks to cover more the unbanked sector that they've unable to touch now, and we are helping them, enable them to do that in a more efficient level. Right? Investment insurtech in the countries has been rising as well, as people has realized that okay, micro insurance is important as COVID hit. Right? We have COVID insurance, we have fly insurance on the search. And that is for the mobile sector, mobile banking consumers. On the other hand, when we do the merchant acquisitions, we have built a significant payment rail connecting the banks with the merchants through our QR national standards. In this environment, while the shop was closed, people moved online, and our payment gateway has a big jump in transactions over the period of April to July this year. And we're seeing that the trend is pretty consistent, and we are helping the merchants to access more data and connect to lenders as well, because now the data is pretty consistent, and we're able to analyze big chunk of data and help the small SMEs to have better reach to the finance sector. Yeah.
Right. Thanks, Chi. I mean,
Matt, sorry, I want to just amplify what Chi just told.
Yeah.
As she explained, there are two public goods she bought, but I want everybody to clearly understand this one because this is very important. Most of the market are putting public utility to do eKYC. That's an unprecedented opportunity for many players to come. Most countries are putting public utility for common QR code acceptance. Very few countries in different part of the world are thinking to put public utility for common QR acceptance. And these are the significant public policy change, which is creating a huge opportunity for anybody who wants to come to Asia. I want to end this with one data point. During COVID crisis, I want all of you watching to go and check out. Cambodia launched one of the most innovative payment system ever built globally. One of the most innovative. They built a new payment system on back of a central bank issued digital currency. No country has achieved that production level payment system built on top of a central bank issued digital currency. So innovation is happening in a space, in a time, in a place where you would never imagine.
Thanks both. I just want to say just quickly from the chair that, and we've obviously got understandable focus on the banking side on this panel, but with my prudential hat on, insurance, Chi mentioned insurance, and there's a lot happening there as well. We can now sell, partly because of the flexibility that regulators are showing, we can now sell over 90% of our products across Asia online. But there is a responsibility on us as well. The regulators are being flexible, but we need to be flexible in terms of thinking about how we adapt our products to make sure they can be sold safely online, and so on. I want to go back to Chi. By the way, we've got a question coming online for you, but I'm going to give you a little bit of a break. You can see it in the chat function, but I'll come back to that in a second. I want to go back to Nick and Matt, and there's been either to react to some of the things that Yanti and Chi have said, pick up on those, but also there's been it's really great to see such positivity from the panel, and that's what we'd expect given the subject matter. Fintech is a massive opportunity, but are there any challenges you see looking ahead? Are there even any, despite we're talking about technology and the online world, but are there any challenges of the current situation for looking to grow? I mean, for ourselves, for example, it's still an issue that it's difficult to move people around if you're an international business. Even if you're in fintech and technology, you need to move people around, and that's obviously hard. But we have to cope with that. But should we start with Matt and then go to Nick on are there challenges? What do we need to solve? And then I'll come back to Yanti and Chi as well to come in on that. Matt.
So, I come at this with obviously a clear agenda in my head, which is around fraud and money laundering controls. One of the biggest mistakes that we see from a lot of the new entrants, especially those that are either trying to get a banking license or have just got one, is they underestimate how big of a target they're going to become, because their fraud losses are zero for years and years. And then all of a sudden, they become a very famous brand. And all of a sudden, because they've made the customer experience so easy, because they've made it so frictionless, they become a really big target for fraudsters or money launderers. And it's very easy to take large amounts of money from these organizations, from their customers, and then also those organizations face the fines. So, one word of caution we would always say is, if you want to play with the big boys, then make sure you've got that same level of protection in place, because all too often what organizations will do is they'll try and build in-house. They'll have some really bright people who are good at building data science, and will go and say, hey, we can build models for this ourselves, but actually what you need is the real experience of the financial crime and current fraud problems look like, and also be able to system which is actually going to protect the organization. So less of a challenge, more of a kind of a word of caution. And I think the reality is also that those sorts of losses when they happen, and also those money laundering fines when they happen, they will begin to change, I think, how regulators look at some of the new entrants within the market as well. So it's really important that everyone who's part of the new fintech ecosystem takes those sorts of controls really seriously.
Thanks, Matt. Nick, over to you.
Yeah, so I mean, I think the challenges in this region, the challenges that every country around the world is facing. So I don't want to sound like a Christmas cracker motto, but I think in the challenge is the opportunity. So I'll take one of the organisations we're working with at the moment. So depending which Southeast Asian country you go into, 70, 80, 90% of the population is employed by SMEs. And as we saw in the video and some of the conversation earlier, those organisations are particularly vulnerable to the COVID impact, and it's not over yet, right? There's depending who you listen to, COVID impact will last for another year or 2 years, and some SMEs are hanging on by the skin of their teeth. There is funding available, both government funding and there is still private money that's looking for a good home. The challenge is how does it get to the SMEs in some of these countries? So there's a group of folks in this region, Impact Credit Solutions, and they've chosen Indonesia, and what they are almost finished building now is basically a platform, a marketplace for money to meet SMEs. And they're recruiting, and it is a marketplace. At the back end, they're recruiting funds both, from banks in Indonesia and internationally. And then they built some really, on top of our core banking, they've also built some really clever analytics, using some unique sets of data and way of doing it for credit risk modelling, where SMEs, many of the SMEs in Indonesia wouldn't have the full banking records that are required and things like that. And the idea is to get the money to those SMEs, so those SMEs can then support their employees in a far more effective and automated way, with rapid decisioning and not 6 days of paperwork and needing 400 forms. And also Indonesia, 300 million people, massive land area, varying levels of ability to get to bank branches and those kind of things. So I mean, I think it's that challenge space, and COVID has only kind of made life more difficult, so made the challenge more critical. That's where fintech can play. And I think what you heard from both Trang Thuong and Sotnendu is what we're seeing is regulators. I mean, certainly Singapore, right? Singapore is the digital transformation leader in this region by design, right? It's the work that the government has done by design. I think countries like Thailand are also taking their own steps and are well advanced. Other countries and many organisations and some of the incumbent banks and all that sort of thing were sort of digital by default to the extent they needed to. COVID has given a massive sort of kick up the backside, and everybody's realising they've got to become digital by design, and they've got to engage. Otherwise, they're just not going to survive the challenges of the next couple of years. But yeah, fintech and regulators both huge opportunity, but and in some ways responsibility to help the underbanked, and SMEs are very often underbanked.
Thanks, Nick. So I'm going to come back to G with the question we had coming in online, but then open it up to others as well. Can I ask everyone to try and keep their answers on this one quick, because I want to give you all a final word, and we are running slightly short of time. But G, there was a specific question on what advice would you give to UK tech companies that wanted to partner with a company, with your company or a company like yourselves, You know, are there opportunities, and what advice can you give? And then maybe if I can then ask others just to chip in on that generally, you know, what advice would they give to UK companies perhaps who aren't as experienced as working in the region as you are, for Matt and Nick? What do they need to think about for doing that? Chi.
We are basically, VNPay itself is a technology company. We develop payment technologies which can be integrated with the core banking systems in Vietnam, right? So for ourselves, we look into partnership in payment technologies and fraud detections and so on. We have set up a R&D center in Singapore, as we believe that is where we can get the best talents, you know, we get from Google, Facebook, large technology companies in having, and we are very open in terms of technology partnership, whether it's payment, it's e-commerce technologies, fraud detection, and so on. For advice in terms of partnership, I think understanding local is the most important part in doing business overseas. We ourselves does invest in Myanmar to do business in Myanmar. We think the same, right? So when it comes to Vietnam, it's similar. Familiarity with the regulations, the framework, and having a trusted partner is the most important part to make a partnership success.
Thank you, Chi. Matt, do you want to?
Yeah. Well, I guess a couple of things. I mean, you know, it's interesting. We did the US first, and then we went to Asia second. And the US is really successful for us on a fly-in, fly-out basis, where the senior executives just spent our lives flying backwards and forwards. In Asia, it's a lot harder to do that, not just because the flights are longer and the time zone is brutal, but also actually that there's a huge amount of local expertise, which is really, really hard to get your head around when you're doing it on that basis. So I recommend trying to hire someone in the region, you know, or someone who wants to move back to that region as quickly as possible. That for us was really successful. And also just don't underestimate the market. You know, it's interesting when we enter new markets, often they see the UK as being quite a long way ahead of where they are on a lot of matters. But you know, when we first went to Singapore, in the early meetings, we were going, oh wow, you guys are like really good. You know, you're doing lots of things really, really well, which is awesome. So you know, for us that was great. But I think it was quite different from where we'd entered new markets, which normally are a little behind the UK from a financial services point of view. So those would be my two things.
Thanks. Nick, anything quick before we?
No, I mean, I reflect. You cannot do the fly in, fly out. You have to understand that Asia is a collection of very different cultures and economies in different states of growth and technology and all those sorts of things. You know, make sure you understand what your value proposition is. Survey the region. You know, partner, and then, you know, focus and show that you're here to stay and invest. You know, you won't get any traction if you give off the vibe that you're sort of in and out.
Thank you. Right. Look, we're coming to the end of the session, so I'd like to come back to the panel, all of you, briefly. Just I mean, look, it's been you've really focused on the exciting stuff that's happening now and the progress that's been made. Looking ahead to 2021, you know, none of us know how, it's been an unpredictable year. None of us know how 2021 is going to turn out, but maybe just pick out, you know, one big opportunity for next year and you know, a challenge as well, you know, if you think there's something that we all need to be thinking about in order to make the most of that. So one big opportunity and one big challenge. Chi, I'll start with you and then go to Nick and Matt and then finish with Mahanta.
I think opportunity for us is the recovery of the economy post-COVID. As we've seen the news on the vaccine gave us a big hope for our travels sectors, our retail sectors as well. The challenge for us is that how to accelerate the cashless payment in the economy, because despite a lot of effort, we still have a lot of unbanked populations, and to reach them with either banking, mobile banking apps or mobile money, it needs an effort, and we will get there. I hope that next year we will get there faster. Yeah.
Thanks, Chi. Nick.
Yeah, I mean, probably much the same. I mean, I think the massive opportunity is probably in the SME space, which is, you know, which is kind of a makes me Captain Obvious. But given the volume of SMEs and quite how much of the economies they drive over here, and the funding gap. I mean, I saw an article a while ago that somebody estimated it was like a $4.5 trillion funding gap. You know, that SMEs needed in order, and that was pre-COVID. So I think the opportunity there is in that space. In terms of the challenge, I mean, it's the challenge is that if it was easy, somebody would have done it already, right? I mean, there are, depending which country you go to, there are regulatory challenges. So you're going to need to work with the regulator and hope that it's one like Singapore's, where, you know, there is active engagement and consultation with the market, and they want to help technology companies succeed. There is the sheer physical size and dislocation of some of the countries and the infrastructure and things like that. But if you're in the UK and you're thinking of coming, it is at once the most frustrating but also exciting region I've ever worked in, and I've worked in lots of them.
Thanks, Nick. And Matt?
So I think, you know, there's so much opportunity, it's hard to know. I mean, SMEs, of course, but I think everything is going to change slightly, whether you're in the travel industry, you're in financial services. The way the world works is going to adapt. So there's a huge amount of opportunity to bring exciting new propositions to market. The threat is directly linked to that. You know, fraudsters, they rely on vulnerability. They rely on changes. They rely on people not having thought everything through. And as you create new opportunities, as you build new channels, as you build new government incentives, you know, even or benefit schemes, the fraudsters take advantage of that. So the big thing to be aware of is all of this change and volatility that's going on. This is great news for the fraud industry. And if you don't have the right controls in place, they will be making a huge amount of money out of you and your customers.
We have been warned, and thank you, Matt and Mohanty, to finish us off, to round us off from the regulatory side.
I'm not going to talk about the future, because I'm going to answer your second last question as for the time here quickly. If anybody from UK wants to come to ASEAN, there are 4 P's to worry about. Build a partner locally. You cannot come and try to build yourself, very difficult. Understand the second P, the policies. They're very critical. Policymakers are very particular about the regulation. A lot of people, the third P, a lot of people here. The scale is critical. Don't come with a solution not ready for a scale. And the last P is patience. You got to have a lot of patience to deal with this market. So if you have the 4 P's in your mind, Asia is a huge opportunity. ASEAN in particular is the best place to operate.
Thank you, Mohanty. Look, that's great advice for anybody listening and thinking about these markets, which, you know, are, as everyone has said, tremendously exciting and have got an enormous amount of potential. But you need to think about them carefully and focus on those things that Mohanty's just said. Look, that brings us to the end of the session. It's been a really interesting look through, you know, one of the hottest topics, which is, you know, fintech would have been anyway this year, would have been a massive focus for us all, but given COVID, given the challenges, but also some of the opportunities it throws up, it's even more central. We've had a really good discussion of the regulatory side, including what governments are doing to build a sort of public utility approach to things like identity, which are some of the enablers of a thriving fintech sector. We've had a great discussion of the potential for inclusion of individuals and also SMEs, and you know, we've also just talked about how really this can accelerate the economy, and that's something which we are all going to need as we look to try and try and return to growth next year. So thank you very much to our speakers and the people who put in the questions. That also brings us to the end of today's forum as a whole. So on behalf of the UK-ASEAN Business Council, which I'm a board director, and on behalf of I'd like to say thank you to the ASEAN Business Advisory Council for co-hosting, and to the UK Department of Trade for partnering with us. We're really grateful to all the speakers we've had. We've had the ASEAN Deputy Secretary General, we've had the Vietnamese Vice Minister, we've had the UK Trade Minister, Trade Commissioner, the ASEAN Ambassador, and the Lord Mayor. So fantastic range of speakers, and of course all the really insightful speakers we've had on this panel and earlier panels from regulators and business and so on. So thank you very much, and thank you everyone for joining in as well. Forums like this are really important to enable us to come together and discuss, some of the opportunities and also some of the challenges. With my Prudential hat on, Prudential as the Pan-ASEAN life and health insurer and asset manager, we're in 9 out of 10 ASEAN markets. We're really pleased to have partnered this first ASEAN-UK Business Forum. So we look forward to doing it again, we hope, next year. Hopefully, as everyone traditionally says at the end of these events now, hopefully next time we'll see each other in person. But whatever happens, we will continue these conversations, and we look forward to seeing you again in some form, virtual or real, soon in the future. So I'm going to hand back now to Alan, who I think is going to point you towards a virtual goodie bag.
Very big thank you to you, Dr. Matt Kavanagh, and to our fantastic panel for that excellent discussion. And as Matt has said, that wraps up our inaugural ASEAN-UK Business Forum. But before we go, if you'd like to watch any of the discussions at a later stage, they will be available on our website with a link to our YouTube channel. Like all good events, we do indeed have a goodie bag, which has some very useful links on the discussions today. They can be found in the chat function in your screen. Also like to highlight that tomorrow is the ASEAN Business and Investment Summit that is in Hanoi. To watch the summit from the comfort of your home or your office, please log on to www.abis2020.vn. That's abis2020.vn. ASEAN next year will be chaired by Brunei Darussalam, and we look forward to welcoming you to the ASEAN-UK Business Forum next year. With that, thank you very much for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you again in the not too distant future. Thank you and goodbye.